Welcome to Mustard Cat Sports, folks. My name's Lucas TA. We got a special guest today. We're talking mostly NASCAR, all NASCAR. I'd like to welcome Alex in on the show. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Hey, thank you, Lucas. Thank you for having me on.
Hey, not a problem. For any of you guys that don't know, Alex is pretty prominent on X. He tells it like it is a lot of times, and some people like it, some people don't like it, but hey, someone's got to say it. So,
You
um,
ever see this Gordon scheme commenting about something? I'm the guy who hates everything, by the way. That's how you'll recognize me.
hey, I don't think you hate everything. You just, you got the points that you got to say to the people, and sometimes they don't like it. So,
Comes from a place of love, I swear.
all right. Well, let's get into the hard questions for you, Alex. And this, you have to choose between one of the two. There's no, I'm taking both. So, are you more of a
Mhm.
dog person or a cat person?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I suppose I'll put my caveat ahead of my full answer by saying I currently have two dogs, both miniature schnauzers, love
Okay.
them to death. That said, I honestly think I prefer cats.
Oh yeah, really?
There's something very chill
Okay.
about cats, or at least the cats that I've interacted with, and I
Yeah.
feel like I'd love to have a cat someday. And gun in my head, I'll pick cat at least today.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I'm more of a dog person, so you know that is what it
Completely
is.
understandable.
But I don't hate cats. But now I'm toting the line. Like I said, I can't do so. But it is what it is. Um, this is the really hard hitting question.
Mhm.
So, if you can only have one condiment for the rest of your life, is it going to be mustard or ketchup?
One condiment for the rest of my
Yes.
life, like on anything, or
Yes, on anything. Like this is the only condiment. Like there's condiments out in the world, but this is the only one you can use. So,
only one I can ever use
and
between
and
mustard or ketchup.
And hear me out here. It is acceptable to have like, if you do ketchup, you can have spicy ketchup and then the regular ketchup. There's really no other ketchups I've seen out there. But then mustard has a plethora of different flavors and genres. Dijon mustard, spicy mustard. So you would get the whole family with it.
It's a good point. Am I allowed to vote third party, or must I choose between mustard or ketchup? No is fine.
No, you cannot.
All right, between mustard or ketchup, my answer is mustard.
Okay. Okay. Well, the people of Illinois would very much appreciate that. So.
Happy to know I'm welcomed by the people of Illinois.
Um, all right. Let's I'm not gonna tell you what mine is, so um
Oh, I'll just have to wonder.
yeah, we'll leave that in mystery. Um so now let's get into the NASCAR stuff. When did you start watching NASCAR? Like what year exact?
Well, there's actually a couple of answers to that because pretty much as long as I remember, NASCAR has always been something that's been at least tangential
Hmm.
to my life. When I was a very little kid, there are photographs of me not more than 1 or 2 years old in
Hmm.
the wintertime wearing a Dale Jr. beanie. Once or twice every summer, watch a race on TV, just kind of randomly, wouldn't pay too much attention. 2011, however, is when I actually started
Yeah.
to make an effort to watch every race and pay attention, and more than just, oh, watch the highlights or the crashes.
Yeah.
Watch every race, sit down. I watched the 500 that year. First 500, I have a specific uh, memory of watching, and I enjoyed it. So
So you would say that the 500 was probably your official time that you just started
I'd
watching.
say
Mhm.
for ease of discussion, the 2011 Daytona 500 is where I'll put the
Okay.
pin.
Okay. Um that's interesting you say this. And for everyone that's listening, I have talked to Alex like over X, like just talking generally, but I've never really asked him any of these hard-hitting questions. And I actually started my first race was the Daytona 500 too. So that's really interesting to kind of know that because that's a big race that doesn't really get its due anymore, I feel like.
The 2011 500 specifically.
No, you would have to go back
Oh,
a whole 10 years, 2001.
ooh.
So that was my first race, and when I officially hit the ground running. So yeah. Um,
Suppose, sorry about that, but
well, it was funny story. I didn't watch a lick of NASCAR, and my dad had it on, and I was sitting down there pre-race watching it, and I was like, "Oh, look at those cars!" And I was young, I was probably fourth, fifth grade, and I was like, "I want to pick a driver." And the Ward Burton car, because it's cat on there, just stuck out to me like a sore thumb. And that was one of his better Daytona 500 dominance until he got in the big wreck. And I was loving it. And right when he got in the wreck, I was like, oh. So then I went outside and played with my friends. I didn't get to see the end of the race. And when I came in, my dad
ooh,
said that by then we were eating dinner and they knew Dale Earnhardt died. So I was like, holy shit. Like, and then ever since then, I've never stopped watching. Well, I can't say never stopped watching NASCAR, but I watched NASCAR for a solid amount of years. So,
wow.
and but yeah, it was a great race until that point, we'll just say. And
I
then
agree that
so
that rules package that they introduced at the end of 2000 really was some
yeah.
phenomenal play racing, and it's just a shame how it ended. I remember Ward went on the Dale Jr. download
Mm.
probably 4 or 5 years ago at this point. He was talking to Junior about how the L1 car that he had, he thought was a better race car that race than the car he ended up winning the
Yeah.
500 with the next year. I think he said
Mm.
something like that car was cheated up to hell. I think he led the most laps that day in
Yeah.
2001 before that big wreck.
Yeah, he did. It was fun like as a fan way back in that day, I didn't take in as much and consume it as much as I do now, like
Mhm.
mentally take it in, but I've gone back and watched that race multiple times. And watching him go through the field, um, back and forth. There was many people that were able to do it, but he was able to do it so much better. Very much like how Dale Jr. had his dominance from like 2001 to what was it, 2005, when he was just able to cut it up.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
it was very much like that, but he only had that one race. Dale Jr. had it
Hmm.
like that whole
Yeah, yeah.
few years. So, um, but I guess my next question for you would be, so is was Dale Jr. your favorite driver? Or who was your favorite driver, or who is your kind of favorite driver now?
My favorite driver now is Jeff Gordon, as I imagine
Okay.
most people would assume from my
The tw
profile
Yeah,
picture.
I was gonna.
But no, you're right in mentioning Dale Jr. because when I first started paying attention in 2011, I
Mhm,
was rooting for Junior. My earliest deliberate, specific NASCAR memory that wasn't watching a race
mhm.
was my dad showing me a newspaper article announcing that Junior would be moving to Hendrick
All
for
right.
2008. And in
Yeah.
my head, DEI Hendrick, those names, if
Mhm.
I even remembered them, they meant nothing to me. But what I was, oh, he's going from 8 to 88.
Yeah.
Whoa. That's all I focused on. But so for that first year, 2011, I actually was a Junior fan.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you remember those commercials. I remember when he did have that press conference, and then they had all those commercials where people were freaking out because he was switching up the eight, and some guy was getting a tattoo and all that fun stuff, and they're freaking out because he was getting it was eight, but then he was going to 88. So then they all like, because then all they had to do was add the eight on there. It was really great commercials back then. I feel like helping NASCAR out more than what it does now. So
I agree. I don't remember any of those
yeah.
commercials
Oh,
specifically, but I
uh,
remember a lot of Napa commercials with Michael Waltrip and Martin
yeah,
Truex from around that 2010, 2012 period.
yeah.
My favorite one of those was Michael Waltrip was hosting an autograph session. The premise of the commercial, he's like signing. merch and die
Mhm.
cast. So one guy comes up and he's like, "Oh, I make custom die cast collectibles to make them look like how they looked in the race."
Yeah,
And he sets down the car. It's, "Oh, this is your big fire at Fontana." And it's just this mutilated number
yeah,
55 car.
I do.
And Michael signs that, and then he goes to the next one. "Oh, this is your Bristol Crest," and he just
The-
dumps out a box full of parts.
I do remember that.
That was a
Yeah,
classic.
no, I wish they would do more stuff like that. They're so iconic, and I don't know, it just like people bitch and complain about commercials nowadays, and I get it because they're poorly timed, a lot of them are, but if they would have more entertaining commercials like that, I feel like people are still gonna bitch. They're always gonna bitch, but
Yeah,
it'll be a little bit better.
I agree. But that's the
So,
sort of thing where it ended up kind of being a vicious cycle of like, well, if you're watching the
mhm,
popularity decline, how many companies are willing to put that money into getting XYZ driver and
right.
making specialized ads rather than just running their generic ads? We can
Yeah.
get into that a little bit later.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No. So yeah, so you basically started off as a Dale Jr. and then kind of weaseled your way over to Jeff Gordon then? Is that how that worked?
Pretty much. Well, my grandmother had always been a Gordon fan for as long as
Okay.
she had been watching NASCAR. She was mainly the reason that I had that
Okay.
exposure to NASCAR early on. For either my Christmas or a birthday, I got
Hmm.
a Jeff Gordon and a Ryan Newman little 164 diecast car. Played
Yeah.
with them all the time, brought them into show and tell in like preschool. At that point, I still don't think I'd ever watched any race, but I just thought the
Yeah.
little model cars were cool. But she was a Gordon fan. So when I started watching a lot more races with her, this would have been about 2012, I
Okay.
decided, you know what, I'll root for the same driver as my grandma. So that way we have sort of shared interest in the
Yeah.
outcome of the race. And that was a really fun time. Those few years where I was watching races with her and we were both pulling for Gordon.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. My grandpa was a big Dale Earnhardt fan. Um, and then obviously he passed in 2001. So he just kind of watched the races. Then after that, I was just a general fan. But um, yeah, I always didn't, well, obviously I started right when he passed away, but I've gone back and watched many of races. I've went through the whole 2000 season on YouTube. I've went through all 99. I've been working on 98 recently, but he was a character. Dale Earnhardt was
Oh yeah.
he was very entertaining, and I feel like if I would have been watching back then or been older, I don't think I would have gravitated towards him as a like big fan of his, but I would have very much appreciated him, very much like Denny Hamlin is. And I'm not saying Denny Hamlin is Dale Earnhardt by any means, but they both have that entertainment factor that you want to watch them, hate them, you know, do something. You just want them in the race because you want to either cheer for them or you want to throw cucumbers at them. So,
No, I do agree with that. That similarity. Dale Sr. was absolutely a polarizing figure, and that's something as someone who sort of joined the sport and began learning after the sport long after he had already passed, never got a
mm,
chance to watch him live. I didn't really realize as much just quite how polarizing he was, because the highlights would have been such things as his 98 Daytona
yep,
500 victory, where literally every person on every team high-fived him after the race. So you get that picture in
yeah,
your head like, oh, everybody loved Earnhardt. And that was really not the case.
no,
At least geographically. People in Talladega largely loved Senior, but I mean,
yeah,
then you watch a highlight of his Bristol race and just the boos just echoing the entire cool down lap as he's pulling into victory lane. Having rewatched that race, I think he should have been parked for reckless driving and they should have handed the win
yeah,
to Spencer.
yeah,
But that is neither here nor there.
yeah,
But that's with Hamlin today. I am going to miss when he retires. I am
mm,
absolutely not a Denny Hamlin fan, at least on the track,
mm,
but he is an excellent heel for the sport. And I think back in the day, Dale Sr. was even more so. He is because you need to be both
mm,
good enough and antagonistic enough to enough competitors on the track to sort of earn that. It'd be one thing if Dale Earnhardt was, moving people out of the way, but also still never winning.
yeah,
He'd race you rough. He'd race everybody the same, but that same would be pretty rough. He'd win. and he'd give his sort of cheeky smile after, I just meant to rattle his cage a little bit. And
Yeah,
it's just like, all right, that is perfect.
yeah,
Perfect for selling the image, the idea of Dale Earnhardt.
yeah. No, he did a great job at showing who he was on the track, but that didn't always characterize him as who he is off the track. But
Great.
he was damn good at it. Like just a quick example, I think it was 1999, the Las Vegas race where the Burton brothers had their battle at the very end.
Mhm.
Um, through the like mid part of the race, Jeff Burton got out front and was trying to lap Dale, and Dale was making it almost impossible for him to pass him um, because he was just trying to stay on the lead lap, and that's something that uh, Ryan Newman would race the shit out of everyone, no
Oh
matter if
yeah.
you were like first or racing for last. Ross Chastain does a little of that too nowadays, but like he just raced people, and he didn't care if you didn't like it. He was gonna do it. It was just like you can go back to the whole his whole career, and he was the heel at times, but he also flip flopped. And it's funny to watch him throughout his whole career kind of switch back and forth between heel and then not being the heel. And like, there's not really anyone else that has gone through the sport that has done that. There's been a few that have been the heel and then became the hero, but never flip flop, flip flop, flip flop. Like, he could do
Yeah,
it
I
so well.
agree.
So he just did it so well like that. And it always re-energized him and his fans and the people that didn't like him. Like it just kept it going. That's why he like Jeff Gordon, don't get me wrong, is probably one of the most iconic people out there in the NASCAR whole history. But I don't see Jeff Gordon as polarizing or as the heel. He had his tiff with, you know, Dale Earnhardt, but he never he never got to that point like Dale was able to. So I like it's cool. It's just really cool to see that, and I hope more people can appreciate that from Dale Earnhardt because I there won't be anyone like that ever again. But it would be really cool if someone could not be another Dale Earnhardt, but have that same quality to be able to make themselves the heel, make themselves the hero, be able to kind of flip flop. And we've seen that just a slight bit with Denny because I think people are changing, but it's changing because he's dwindling down towards the end of his career, not because, he's just flipping like Dale Earnhardt was able to do. So,
Yeah, and I think a lot of Denny Hamlin's public opinion now is shaped a lot more by off-track stuff rather than on-track.
correct.
Um, and that's something that wasn't quite ever the same story with Dale Earnhardt. Although towards the end of his career, as a businessman running DEI, building DEI to essentially be his what he would leave to the world once he ideally retired, but once he left racing.
Yeah.
And from that sense, you towards the end of the because it was also like you said towards the twilight of his career, when you get to that sort of 2000
Hmm.
time period of okay, what is he doing on the track versus what's he doing off the track? By which point, of course, you also had Dale Jr. coming up into the Cup Series after his Bush championships.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't think anyone's going to ever follow that career trajectory that Earnhardt had in terms of his racing, his appeal or lack thereof, or I suppose appeal in terms of drawing the boos, drawing the cheers. At
Yeah.
least they're making noise.
Yeah.
No one's ever going to be able to do that or kind of bounce back and forth, like you said. And again, even geographically, there were some places like Talladega that would always love Earnhardt. And
Earnhardt.
in Daytona, he was kind of like the one who was always just so close but never could. And then there were other places where like Bristol, where it's just like, get him out of here.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, and I don't think that's something we're going to see again, or at least not not in the foreseeable future.
No, there's going to have to be some major changes, which we will get a little into that here. Um, so I guess do you have a favorite era like in NASCAR? Obviously, you started coming into the sport around 2011, so that would have been the Gen 5 era.
Hmm.
Um, like for me, I started in the Gen 4, and I'm obsessed with that fucking car and that whole era. But what would you say yours would be? But I would say before you answer, I haven't done a lot of watching of the old Gen 3, but the Gen 3 was a very interesting time period and very interesting car. It just it was a lot more spread out between the teams, like between the good and bad teams. But some of the racing in the Gen 3 was really, really good at times.
I agree, and I'm going to, if it's all right, I'm going to give two answers for this. One answer being sort of overall based on
Hmm.
my accumulated knowledge of all the races I've watched, gone back and watched, kind of regardless of what I watched in real time,
Yeah.
and the of the eras that I watched live, what my favorite would be. And I'm going to start with that latter. My favorite season
Hmm.
that I've ever watched personally is 2014. Both
Okay.
because I really like that race car, although I don't think it's the best. I really like that
Mhm.
2014 package,
Yeah,
but
I'd
also
agree.
because that was the year that I went to my first race. That was the year where I saw
What
my favorite driver win the most times.
what
Fortunately, I didn't see him win in person, but
what race was it?
it was the spring Dover race in
Okay.
2014.
Okay.
That was my first race
First race. Okay.
because I was given the opportunity the year before.
Hmm.
My grandmother said, take you to one race, 2014. Which one do you want to go to? And I, of course, picked the first Dover race because I wanted to do it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And then Jeff went and won the second one. And that's something in the back of my mind. I'll always just regret a little bit not
Yeah.
going to the chase race that year.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, and as much as I'm not a fan of the playoffs at this point, as that was happening, I was excited. I didn't
Mm.
sort of I didn't foresee the sort of shortcomings the format would end up displaying that very year.
Yeah.
Eh, but the drama that it produced really was something else. And people, for better or worse, people remember
Yeah.
Brad Kay being a
Uh,
basically loose cannon the entire
yes.
playoffs. Matt Kenseth, Tony Stewart backing into him at that
Yeah.
Charlotte race, and then Matt Kenseth fighting him between the haulers, and then of
Yeah.
course Texas. Um,
The brawl.
the brawl that was, oof.
Yeah.
Jeff Gordon said dipshit on TV. uh, yeah, that was
Yeah. I would
of.
I would say the 2014, I agree with you. That package, um, lightning in a bottle. I obviously teams are always going to figure stuff out and make it less appealing and exciting, but if they could have bottled that up and just kept it the same, uh, it produced a lot of really good racing. And I would say there was probably like when the playoffs started, everyone liked it because it was new, something fresh, something like ooh.
Mhm,
And just like anything new, there's always unknowns, and you're gonna have a little more drama when there's unknowns. So
mhm.
it I don't blame people for being excited for something that is new and potentially could be something great. But we all know the end of the story. It's not. So,
I think a lot of it came down to the sort of maybe having an idea of, oh, what if XYZ driver has something unlucky happen and they're unable to
mhm.
advance. I think that's something that even I had in the back of my mind, but I was always like, no, no, no. Jeff is having a fantastic year. I'm sure
Yeah,
he'll figure a way to advance.
correct. Yeah.
Of course, he didn't. And then we know how that all ended up. But no, I can't blame anyone for liking that. On the flip side, I can't blame people who at the time had complaints with the 2014 package. It wasn't perfect. My
No.
personal biggest grievance were the side skirt flares, which became tire cutting machines.
Yeah.
Again, ask why. But it did have Dirty Air got progressively worse pretty much with every iteration of car after
Hmm.
the, or even in the middle of the Gen 4 era. And
Yeah.
that's something that's valid to complain about. But I think there's almost a bit of, I hesitate saying revisionist history because it sounds a bit mean, but that's what I think it is sometimes of saying, oh no, the 2014 package wasn't actually great. Didn't you know people hated it at the time? And it's like, well, I get it, but you also have to realize that if someone in the year 2014 has complaints with a car and is comparing it to other cars,
Hmm.
because of how the passage of time works, the only cars you can possibly compare the 2014 package to are 2013, 12, 11, and
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
And I completely agree. If given the opportunity, I would probably take a 2011 COT over a 2014 Gen 6. It'd be close, but I'd probably
Yeah.
take it. And then, of course, anything in the Gen 4, I'd take it. But
Mhm.
that's something that I think a detail that sometimes gets missed in these conversations.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, that's a
oh,
very,
and
very good
let me
point.
give my segue into, I guess, the second part of my answer,
Yeah.
favorite era of all time. You mentioned that you had gone back and rewatched the 99 2000 seasons on YouTube
Hmm.
about a year or two ago. That's something that I did.
Hmm.
When I was first watching NASCAR when I was a little kid getting into it, 2011 and onwards, I had a really hard time going back and watching old races
Yeah.
online. So I was the sort of person where the appeal of sports to me was a lot of it was the fact that it was live, it was happening. You don't know how it ends.
Hmm.
And at that point, I was like, yeah, well, why do I want to watch this old race? I know how it ends. It's always going to end the same way. Later, as my opinion of the present state of the sport began to decline and I began to have more issues with it, I started actually watching those old races. And I went through the 95 season through about the first
Ooh.
half of 2004 before I stopped having quite enough time to dedicate that much time to
Yeah.
watching old seasons.
It takes a while.
It really does take a while, but and I can't say I gave my full attention to every single race of that season, but as someone who might have been watching back then, I'm sure there were some races that you just weren't able to catch all of.
Yeah.
And having done that, my favorite era of NASCAR basically has to be what a lot of people agree the best era of NASCAR was, which would be the mid 90s through
Mhm.
the early 2000s.
Yeah.
On the widest time frame, from what races I've watched little bits and pieces of from these particular seasons, I would say 1990 to 2006 would be that golden era.
Yeah.
1990, of course, started with the Daytona 500 that Derek Cope won after Dale Earnhardt ran over debris on the last lap. And 2006, of course, ending with Jimmy Johnson's first championship, the last full season of the Gen 4, and the last season of the original 10 man, 10 race chase
Hmm.
format, as well as the Daytona 500 that year, having the highest average viewership of any NASCAR race.
Yeah, that was a
I
big one.
think that's what I would mark as that era, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the Gen 3 race car ended in 1991, and there were some changes that made the Gen 4 in
Yeah.
1992.
Yeah. So 92 was when the Gen 4 started. So the Gen
Mm-hmm.
3 was still in the early 90s. Um, but kind of like when you look at the first Gen 4 in 1992, and then you look at the last Gen 4 in 2007 when they ran it part-time, they look almost not even remotely close.
They
Uh,
look very different
yeah.
compared to the last Gen 3 versus the first Gen 4, which is why it's kind of hard to tell. You look at a
Yeah.
91. I think there were wheelbase changes and something with
Yeah.
the amount
The
of factory bodywork you had.
Yeah, the Gen 3 was a way shorter wheelbase. Because
Mm-hmm.
when Gen 2 was like your like truly stock cars that were coming off the showroom and they were just making it more race car-y.
Those are
Um,
the big Monte Carlos, the big
yeah,
Cutlasses, and then they shrunk them because of the
Gen
energy crisis.
yeah. And then the Gen 3 came and that's when the wheelbase got shorter, but then
Mm-hmm.
Gen 4 they pulled it back out a little bit. Not by much, but they got it wider.
Gotcha.
So,
Well,
but
car generations were iterative back then. There wasn't quite as much a big sport mandate of we're going to completely change XYZ about the car to move into the next generation. It was just, all right, we've ran it with these
Mhm.
basic rules for a while. We're going to call it a new generation essentially because we're making more rule changes than usual for this upcoming season.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
Uh, um, well, let's get into the main ones.
Ooh.
We'll tread through these as best as we can. And try not to drag them on too long because that we could probably sit and talk the whole day about all this stuff. Um, we'll start with one of the main issues. I would say all three of these are main issues, but the first one I would say needs to happen sooner than later if they want to retain any sort of hope with getting NASCAR even going upwards because it's the least cost effective one, and that's the points. It doesn't take money to, or it takes a minimal amount of money to change the points. And like you were just saying, a lot of people enjoyed the playoffs when it very first started. There's still people that do enjoy the playoffs, which there's nothing wrong with that. But when you are seeing a majority of your fan base, and this isn't even just the people on X or Twitter, it's on Facebook, it's on Instagram, it's on every social media platform that you can find. Any poll that I've seen, and it doesn't matter if it's 1,000 people or 45 people, whatever the amount of people, the most piece of the pie is always full season points. And then
Mm-hmm.
coming in second is the 10 race chase. And then
Mm-hmm.
playoffs and any other iteration of it is usually less than 10%, which, yes, that's not everyone in the NASCAR world. You're not all voting on
Mm-hmm.
that, but you can kind of take that as a small portion and be like, hey, it's probably pretty close to what it would be if every person in NASCAR voted. It's not a for sure thing, but it's probably in the ballpark. And the ratings haven't been lying, and it's frustrating as a fan. I personally have not watched any of the playoff races this year. I've seen a lot of highlights. I saw last week
Mm-hmm.
with Ross Chastain doing his Ross
Yeah.
Chastaining because he's just trying to get into the playoffs. He's just trying to play the game. But if I want to watch that crap, I'll just go on iRacing because I can enjoy that crap on iRacing because that's an iRacing move. I want to see professionals doing badass moves. They're going to make mistakes, but that's not a mistake. That's just a I have to do this because it's part of the points. I
Mm-hmm.
I don't I don't enjoy watching that. And do you know how you get rid of that? You go back to a full season point system. So I'll leave it with you. What point system do you think they should go to? What one intrigues you the most? Is there one that intrigues you the most? Um, and what can NASCAR is the one that has to do it. So
Yeah.
they need to put their big boy pants on and make the call. And I know
Mhm.
they don't want to do a quick fix because they've done that so many times over the years, but they kind of need to do it sooner than later.
Yeah. Let me try and not to lose my own plot too hard here, because I have basically a few viewpoints on this, and let
Yeah.
me sort of start with a TLDR summary. I
Mhm.
believe the I believe the points format that NASCAR or any motorsport should run would be a full season points. Every race should mean the same
Mhm.
when it comes to the championship. Now, within that bracket, you can have little mini tournaments. Something that I loved particularly about the 1998 to 2002 Winston Cup seasons was the No Bull Five, and that's something we've seen live on in the Xfinity and Truck Series today with
Mhm.
the Dash for Cash and the Triple Truck Challenge. You take a just a small handful of races over the
Mhm.
season, or in the case of the Trip and the Dash for Cash, a few races in a row.
Mhm.
And within that, there's sort of a mini tournament of okay, if you're in the top four, top five, or whatever of this race, you're eligible for $100,000 bonus or whatever if you win the next week. And
Yeah.
back in the Noble 5 days, it was $1 million. And I think things like that are really cool
Yeah.
at taking advantage of the sort of natural intensity knob that you can turn up when you add these sorts of brackets and playoffs without actually sacrificing the integrity of the full season of the sport.
Hmm.
But I believe, yes, the best point system that NASCAR could run would be a full season points. Within that, I think then the question becomes, well, how would you allocate points? Would you use our current system, which has 10-point stages and then 40 points to the winner of the race? Would you do the pre-stage 1 point per position format that was
Hmm.
used from 2011 to 2016, where it was 43 for the winner and then down, and then a couple bonus points for winning and bonus points for leading laps, just remove stages? Or would you use the Latford points that were used in the Winston Cup, which was, I think it was 175 for winner, then 170, 165, and so on. And I think generally speaking, when you're looking at non-stage points formats,
Hmm.
the actual allocation of the points kind of doesn't tend to matter too much. You're going to end up with similar outcomes if you're looking at a stageless current points allocation versus a Winston format, which never had stages.
Hmm.
And I think the biggest trip there would be stages. Um, but I want to circle back to that later.
Hmm.
I think it is most likely, while I would prefer a full season format, I think despite the generally positive momentum we've seen on X in the past few months, or even just the past few weeks, especially spearheaded by people like Mark Martin,
Yeah.
I don't think it's particularly likely that we see a full season points format for 2026. I think the most likely change that NASCAR makes for 2026 is simply removing all of the resets. I'm talking a 16-man chase just without any points resets. I think at a similar level to that would be basically keeping the current system, but just
Hmm.
eliminating the
Reset.
reset after the penultimate
Rounds.
race.
Yeah.
So a 3-3-4 sort of deal where
Hmm.
maybe they change who gets eliminated, but the same bracket of drivers who are eligible remains for those final four races of the season. I think those are both more likely to see
Yeah.
for 2026 than a complete reversal back to to the
Yeah.
full season points.
Yeah. Um, to kind of circle back through some of that, what you were
Mm.
saying, the Winston Noble, I remember watching a lot of those, and though those were so much fun as a fan to watch. One, because someone would have to fact check me 100% on this, because obviously in the beginning of the Noble, uh, well, it was just the Winston, um, and they had to win like 5 or 4 races in a row, and then they switched to the
The first format was the Winston Million from
yes,
1985 to 1997, and it was
yeah,
basically if you could win three legs of the four race
mhm,
crown jewels, which was it was Daytona,
yep,
the first Talladega race, the Coke 600, and the Southern
Southern Fan.
500.
Okay, yeah,
Those four, I think at some point Indianapolis, Talladega got replaced by Indianapolis, but I don't know if that was before or after the Noble switch. Because once I got to Noble, they like changed the tracks every year.
yeah. So
But you
then,
had to win three of those four to win the
yeah,
$1 million
yeah,
at the end, and that only happened twice.
yeah. That was it was a lot harder to achieve that, and I obviously never watched any of those live, but
Mm-hmm.
I've watched a few of the Noble Five ones live back in the day. Ward Burton was in one of them at Richmond. But the funnest and coolest part that I thought, not only could your favorite driver win more money, but like, why would you personally care? Like, because you're not getting any of it, but it's still cool. And it was really cool to see, like, what you were saying in the Xfinity series and in the Truck series, they kind of mark these, 5 teams with little different banners on there. I really like
Yeah, yeah.
the Winston one because it was that bright orange and on
That
some
that
on
beautiful
yeah,
day glow, like
yes,
red or orange, that
yeah,
like sometimes it looks more red, sometimes it
yeah,
looks more orange, and it managed to somehow complement every single scheme it was put
yes,
on, even
it
if that
did,
scheme didn't have any. That
yeah,
was perfect, and
yeah,
I love that. And that's honestly something I love about the 2014 onward
Mhm.
chase and then playoffs of adding those special
Yeah.
markers to identify easily those special drivers. I think that's
Mhm.
a really cool thing that we that can be done in NASCAR for these special events, and that was so cool with the no bull races.
Yeah. So, but it was fun being able to see fans, like a fan
Yes.
uh was paired up with that driver, and they'd be up in these little like suite things.
Yeah.
And watching the race, it was so much fun to see them because obviously I can't remember what race it was. One person was paired up with Mike Skinner, and Mike Skinner he was done for the race. So like they didn't really show that person anymore because they were ineligible to win. But it was like Jeff Burton and Jeff Gordon. It might have been a Darlington race. I don't know exactly, but
Mhm.
it was so much fun because they pan up there and they would never interview them, but they would like zoom in on them and you could see them like getting excited because and that was just they need more of that. And I get sometimes it's a money issue, but hell, even if it was, and the drivers might not be as ecstatic about it, but if it was 100,000 and 100,000 for the fan, like, or even 50,000 for a fan, like just something like that, I don't know, that would bring so much more excitement um, into the sport with that. So I very much agree. They need to do something of that. If they can't, put the whole $1 million thing, I get it. It's money, whatever. I don't
I
see their
think they
books.
can, but I would love to
They
see
probably
that.
can. They probably can. But I'm just saying, like, if money is the issue, you can always come down. People would still be excited to be at a race to be able to win. Like these dirt races that you watch, like the World of Outlaws or High Limit, people go there and they'll get picked to roll the dice or they get picked to be paired with a
Yeah, the high
driver
limit.
and they have a chance to win like $2,000. Like that's not a ton, but if you're going to a race and you're doing literally nothing besides sitting there watching a race and you have a chance to win $2,000, that's cool. Like,
It's a good fan
like
engagement.
yeah,
It's a good fan engagement
yeah,
because it also taps into a little bit of the like sort of everyday Joe sort of
yeah,
appeal of game shows, like a Wheel
yeah,
of Fortune. It's like
yes,
these three schmucks are here playing this game, and one of them could walk away with 50 grand in a car if they could
yeah,
just guess some words and phrases. It's like ooh, because then it imbues in the audience like oh that could be me,
yeah,
and that gives extra importance to those particular events while also not detracting from the overall value of the season because it's very much a self-contained thing. You
hmm,
know those drivers are probably going to try harder to win the race, but I mean even in the No Bull 5 days, five guys, 43 car field.
yeah,
I think for each five events, it wasn't the No Bull 5 wasn't actually won more than twice a year. I could be
yeah.
mistaken, but
I
it was
yeah,
typically a once or twice out of those five, one of those drivers would end up with the because it was all different
yeah,
track types too. You could qualify yourself for the next No Bull event by running well at Daytona or Talladega.
hmm,
But then, you know, if you have a really bad short track program, you might be kind of screwed if
yeah,
it's like, oh great, next week's Richmond, and now I'm in the No Bull 5 at Richmond, and so, oh, I'll be lucky to get 20th.
yeah. No,
but
and
and that sort of element ended up giving a sort of natural
yeah,
cap to just how often because you can't have it get won too many times
no,
because if it comes down to it where pretty much every time that comes around
yeah,
somebody gets the extra million then it sort of loses the intrigue
yeah.
on a fan engagement perspective.
Yeah, so the one gripe that I would say about the Xfinity and the truck,
Mm-hmm.
it's fun that they do it back to back to back to back, but sometimes
Mm-hmm.
you can get on a heater, and
Yeah.
that's the coolest thing about what the Winston did, even when it was the Winston or when it was the Noble,
Mm-hmm.
they had it pretty spread out throughout the year. So maybe
Yeah,
you
they
were
did a
hot,
good job spreading it out.
yeah, maybe you were hot in the beginning of the year, petered off in the middle, and then came back. But if you qualified for it right away, got to the middle one, you were just not very good. You
Mm-hmm.
didn't like you were saying, like if they win all the time, I can't remember what year it was when they did the Xfinity. I think it was when Noah Gragson was in the Xfinity. He won like two out of the four, and
Mm-hmm.
it was cool to see him do that. But it was like, is it that like not saying it was easy, but when you get on these heaters, like
it, it kind
momentum,
of
momentum
burns
is
up the
king.
intrigue
Yeah,
a
it's
bit
like, oh
faster.
yeah, like it's exciting to watch people struggle sometimes and get back to the top. But hey, if they brought even a five race in a row like the Xfinity does, you'd be better
Mm-hmm.
than nothing. So
They sort of tried to do that in 2011 with the what was it, the Sprint Summer Showdown, that even
oh
at the time kind of felt like an
yeah,
afterthought.
yeah,
Because I think the eligible, it was because 2011 was also an interesting season because there were a lot of first time winners. It
yeah,
got to the point in the middle where it's like, oh, the eligible drivers were Brad Keselowski, sort of as
yeah,
he was building himself into
mhm,
the star he became at Penske. David Reagan, Marcus Ambrose, and Paul Menard, because
yeah,
Menard won the Indy 500 that year. So it's like, oh yeah, at Atlanta, anyone could win $1 million, and they're all like 20th.
yeah,
It's just like, oh, okay. So they kind of quietly just dropped that, but I would love to see something like that. And
yeah,
again, especially if in my ideal world the playoffs go away, because I
mhm,
sympathize with the idea of you want that sort of edge of your seat. Anything could take him out of the championship,
yeah,
take him out of contention for whatever they happen to go for. And I just think that's something you can still have that
mhm,
by doing something like this, some of these sort of extracurricular bonus challenges, and not actually end up sacrificing the integrity of the sport and the championship at the end of the year.
yeah,
And you can do that really well, and that is something I would love to see. They sort of the bracket challenge, kinda, but the hard thing with the bracket challenge that I thought this year, if you don't mind me just taking
yeah,
this tangent, I hope not to take too
no,
long. The hardest part I found is one, you're starting it off at a super speedway,
yeah,
so upsets have a lot less meaning when they kind of all happen. What makes
yeah,
March Madness fun is that I think in the history of March Madness, only like twice has a 16 seed beaten a 1 seed that
mhm,
first week.
yeah,
Whereas at Atlanta, you saw, I think Ty Gibbs ended up winning that the bracket challenge because it came down to Ty
yeah,
Gibbs and Ty Dillon,
yeah,
two
yeah, it
guys
was,
who are advancing by basically running 20th every week. And
yeah,
no mean to hate on Ty Gibbs or Ty Dillon,
no,
but when it comes to the fan engagement, it's you kind of peter out. The upsets don't mean much if they always happen,
yeah,
and the fact that that first week especially, but even the second week, there are so many battles going on at the same time. It's impossible to keep track of as a fan. At
mhm,
most, you're only going to be able to pay attention to two or three of those head to heads, and everything else is just whatever. And I think it just ends up being too much all at once,
mhm,
while also not actually necessarily rewarding with big money. It's sort of like set performance at a moment's notice, like
yeah,
those things like the triple truck challenge, Dash for Cash, or the old Noble Five would, where the only way you get the money is if you
to win,
win.
yeah. Um, I guess to piggyback off that, I think that bracket challenge it was a good idea, great idea. I think it's still a good idea. I think it just doesn't work out the greatest in a playoff system. Um, I think it works out really well in a full season points. And hell, even if you were to give extra bonus points for the winner of that, um, I think that could intrigue more teams and fans
I
than
wouldn't mind that.
like I'm not saying like, oh, you get an extra I'm just throwing this number out, 200 points, nothing like that, but something to pad depending on what the points would be. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
if it would depend on what the full season points, how much they'd get. You'd have to give some sort of percentage of it, but it couldn't be like overpowering. It just needs to be just a little bit. So if someone does win it, maybe it's someone that does run 15th to 20th. Maybe that boosts them to almost get in the top 10. Because I remember when it was full season points, and I hate this argument how people are like, oh, if it's a full season point system, the first place person, they're going to lock it up 3 races in. I never gave a flying fuck about any of that as a kid. I was a Ward Burton fan, and I knew where Ward stood. He was
Yeah.
never really, he didn't have the most competitive car because he wasn't in one of the A quote unquote tiers, but he did have his opportune races like super speedways, Darlington, Rockingham.
Yeah, Darlington on lockdown for
Yeah,
like 4 or 5 years there.
yeah.
He won like 2 or 3 races in a very short span at that track.
He should have won a few more there against his brother, but he's
Mhm.
pit crew oopsied a few times and got him far
Yeah,
back in the pack. So, but I knew that Ward was a top like 12 team. And I always was like, if he can just get a top 10 in points, I'm going to be a happy camper. And if he can get a win
yeah,
throughout the whole season. And if he did that, I was like, this is a fucking win of a season. It's like when you
yeah,
watch football and you're like, yes, we made it in the playoffs. If we can get the
hmm
Super Bowl, that's great. But at least we made the playoffs. And that was how I
yeah.
felt. And I knew that. So, like, what do people think? That everyone's cheering for the first place guy and then there's no one throughout the whole entire field? Like you don't think there's people cheering for Ty Dillon? There's not a lot, but there are people that do that.
Yeah.
They know for a fact that Ty Dillon's not going to win a championship. But he
hmm
could win a race, maybe get a top 20 in points and they would be like, "Holy shit, this is great."
They
Like
almost won that bracket challenge.
he did.
Too much. There's just too much weight on the championship is simultaneously been reduced in its actual value
Mhm.
while also being overvalued in the eyes of management, the media, and some number of fans. It really is not. It falls down to another just difference between NASCAR and other sports, and why the argument that I remember my dad telling me he had with online friends in the late '90s of is NASCAR a sport? That sort of perennial argument. We won, but at what cost?
Yeah.
Of a lot of surface level comparisons get drawn between NASCAR and football or basketball that just end up falling apart in practice
Mhm.
when you look at it beyond just the surface level of what's actually happening to hit these sort of buzzwords that might be the same buzzwords that another sport is using,
Yeah.
but do they actually apply? It's like, oh, game 7 moments. Well, I mean, there's only ever one race number 7 of the season, and
Yeah.
it's always the seventh race of the season. It's always pretty early, so that's obviously not what you mean.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's sort of a circling back to what you said of trying to make the bracket a little bit more meaningful in a full season format by giving some points. I don't think that's a bad idea.
No.
I don't know if I don't know if I'd second that myself. But I don't mind that as an idea because I also view that as something I do like about the current points is that the duels are scored as stages.
Yeah.
Ever since 2017, if you won a dual race, you got 10 points.
Mhm.
And I think that's neat because that adds, especially now that there's very rarely a lot of bump day drama due to the economics of the next gen car, due to the basically economics of Daytona
Less people.
as a
Yeah.
racetrack now.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of nice that those races actually do have meaning beyond just, oh, it's just setting the starting lineup for the 500.
Yeah.
Uh, and I would not mind seeing a bracket system, basically bracket challenge, rewarded in that way in a full season format. Although personally, my largest issues with it were too many drivers. Like if it's 32, well, at that point, just
Yeah.
maybe try and make it everything, and maybe give some guys a bye because we love bye weeks. Actually, might be a decent. That actually might not be a terrible idea to make that first round less just daunting of a
Yeah.
task to follow as a fan. If you have like, all right, if it's 32 guys, well, the top half get an automatic bye week, or the top 8, or however it
Mhm.
slices out so that you have clean rounds. And then the seating, like I
Yeah.
mentioned a little bit earlier, of upsets are really hard when you're starting at a
Super
plate
speed.
track like Atlanta, which I
Mhm.
am honestly quite fond of. As
Yeah.
much as it's a crime against nature, I am quite fond of the product that gets put on there, the Cup Series. Not only that, but the way that they had seeded it was, oh, you're not using their current point standings,
Yeah.
you're using just their highest finish within this 3 race window.
Yeah.
So we ended up with, like, I think Ty Gibbs was like a 4 seed or something
Yep.
because he finished second or third down in Mexico City.
Hmm.
And it's like, well, okay, now if someone's like, picture what it would look like if someone's just watching this for the first time. Either they haven't seen a NASCAR race before, or they've only barely been paying attention to the season.
Yeah.
By seating someone like Ty Gibbs, third or fourth, or wherever he ended up, it was very high. You're promoting that, oh, this guy is really good. This is your Duke, your North Carolina, your Virginia, or whatever. This is
Yeah.
a top guy. When it's like, that's really not accurate to how he's been running overall in his career in the Cup Series, or specifically this season. And that means an on paper upset might literally just not be an upset if you've been paying attention to the
Yeah.
sport beyond just that window of the bracket challenge. And I think those would be the biggest ways
Yeah.
I'd want to fix something like that. And with the championship, like you said, you know where your driver's going to do. A good friend of mine, after he was a Jeff Gordon fan, was a Paul Menard fan before he stopped following NASCAR.
Yeah.
And he knew Paul Menard was probably never going to win. But if he got a top 10,
Yeah.
if he could make the chase, I
Yeah.
think it was 2015 or 16, Menard ended up making the chase on points.
Hmm.
That was a good day. That was a
Yeah.
good day. And that's something unique about NASCAR that just doesn't apply to other sports. It's not just wins and
No.
losses. If you wanted to look at it as just wins and losses on a head to head, if you won the race, you're 35 and 0 because you beat
Yeah.
36 other guys. If you finish second, you're 34 and 1. It's one loss, you only lost to one person,
Hmm.
but you beat 34 others. And viewing it like that, of realizing those, to use the analogy of a 500 team in football, like, all right, you're
Hmm.
6-6, it's towards the end of the season, you just want to sneak a win, that's a top 15.
Hmm.
And that's how that would translate. And I think a good way to keep the interest of those fans, or those media members, would be to just focus on those storylines, because those are already there. They always have been there.
Yeah.
And it just takes someone, people don't know what they don't know.
No.
And it's your job as media members of the sport. You can cover this. That infamous 2003 season, Matt Kenseth locked up the title a race early.
Hmm.
Oh, well, who cares about watching Homestead? Well, besides the fact it was a reconfigured track,
Yeah.
NBC that whole weekend highlighted the battle for 12th. At that time, I think it was 550 grand in terms of end of season points payout difference between second and third place.
Hmm.
And the two drivers, I think it was it Elliott and Johnson? I don't remember, but whoever it
Yeah.
was at the end fighting for second, it's like they spent that whole weekend focusing on that, because all right,
Yeah.
who's going to get that extra money, who's going to finish off P2, put themselves in a great position to start 2004. And
Hmm.
like you said earlier, you just wanted Ward Burton to finish in the top 10 at
Yep.
points. Back in those days, top 10 at points got you invited to the year-end banquet.
Yep.
Johnny Benson finished 11th in points twice, 1997 and 2001.
Yeah.
And one of those years, he only missed out on that top 10, that banquet invitation, by 1 point.
Yeah.
That's a storyline. And that's something that you
Yeah.
can reintroduce these days, because think about it. Is it really that much different than, oh, no one would have been talking about Ross or Denny fighting for 18th or 8th in points last week
Hmm.
if it was a full season? I
Yeah.
mean, maybe you could. And that's what you did back in the day. Oh, yeah, the Roval, we knew who the top four was.
Yeah.
If you look at the three race round as a mini championship, because it essentially is, the winners, the advancers, they were locked up really early. The battle is just that cut line, eighth in points and 18th or 20th on the racetrack. It just, in a practical sense, ends up not achieving the purpose it set out to achieve, of
Hmm.
magnifying the importance of wins and focusing on the top stars of the sport. Because when you're looking at these eliminations, by necessity, you're looking at the bottom.
Yeah.
Uh, don't mean to sidetrack too hard, but as you were.
No, that's all good. Yeah, I don't like the comparisons between sports, between NASCAR and a ball and stick sport. There are some things that do equate to that. I think very much like a quarterback and a driver are very much equivalent to that, but I think they like I'm not saying I would rather have a 10 race chase, but I think a 10 race chase is like the perfect middle ground um,
Great.
for NASCAR to have its cake and eat it fucking too. But I'm with you. A true race series should be just a full season points because it makes every race important. It makes every race count. It
Yep.
it is what it is. And I when I go back and look at all these different iterations that they had, I think if they would have kept the 10 race chase and just changed out the 10 races or changed out 9 out of the 10 races or moved them around more, I think people would have been fine with it. One reason is because Jimmy Johnson's dominance, but
Yeah.
but I think that's fixed or not happen as many times. If you look back at those, what, 4, 6 years or whatever it was, that they literally left the 10 races, the same 10 races. Like, that's the equivalent of what it is now with Penske going to Phoenix. Like, they just know. They have the lock. They figured it out. Jimmy Johnson and Chad Canals figured out those 10 races. They knew, hey,
They knew, yeah.
we just need to do enough. And he would mess up during the regular season. Because they were probably testing the shit out, doing stuff.
Oh yeah.
They're like, we know, we just get into it. It's not locked, but we got a good opportunity. And what NASCAR needed to do, and obviously this is hindsight 2020, but all they need to do is switch up some of those tracks. Maybe not all of them, but maybe switch up 5 of them, or just to keep it changing. That's the whole point that I think to roll into the Gen 7 issue is each generation it's good to change it up because teams figure out cars. They figured out the Gen 4 car by the end of the Gen 4 car's life. It was so twisted and it looked really
Yeah.
cool. It was a really cool car to see in person, especially if you can go and look at some old photos of Gasoline Alley in Indianapolis where the
Oh
cars
yeah.
went over there.
I love those.
One
I
side
get
is
why
just
some people don't, but I
it is just a
love the Twisted Sister.
straight line, and then the other side is just and you're like,
Yeah.
holy crap! Like,
This is a machine designed to turn left and only left.
yes. So like, don't get me wrong, I love that too, but it created a bunch of bad, dirty air. But
Mhm.
in hindsight, 2020, I would rather go back to that crappy air that they had then than the crappy air than the crappy air that they have now.
No,
Because
I completely agree. I mean,
so
I was mentioning it a little bit earlier. In
yeah,
2014, someone might have complained about the package,
yeah,
but of course, the only points of comparison are what came before. You don't know
yeah,
what it's going to be. You know what came before.
hmm
Oh, people complained about Dirty Air 20 years ago. Yeah, and then the Dirty Air got worse.
yeah,
Like it's
yeah.
I
So
think I actually do think that the some of the twist introduced to the Gen 4, as well as things like making the tires softer and making the spoiler smaller,
mhm.
that were those were changes every year after 2003. Basically, the spoiler shrank a little bit and the tires got a bit more soft. That actually then improved the dirty air a bit. I think about 2002, 2003, especially. 2003 had probably the worst dirty air, at least that I could see and I could interpret when I'm watching these races, seeing
Mhm.
how the cars behave in traffic. It's a lot better than today, but compared to 01, 02, or compared to
Yeah.
04 to 06, it was worse. And I think some of the twists did get to the point where the cars started to improve their handling in traffic. It was never as good as it was in the early 90s.
No.
It got to the point with some of those car designs, especially with the Pontiac from about 91 to 94, that had the bump out on the nose, then that came back in, then came out to a splitter. It looks almost like a COT splitter, just without the brackets.
hmm
That car did not handle that great in clean air, but it was better in traffic.
Yeah.
Once we got to the tail end of the Gen 4, I do think they improved the dirty air a bit.
Yeah.
And that's just that, but
Yeah.
that's something it's like, okay, even if you are of the opinion, okay, the
Yeah.
dirty air at the end of the Gen 4 wasn't great. It's like, dude, it just kept getting worse. I'm
No.
sorry.
It, it yeah, and that's 100% right. And I get why people are like, oh, well, it was crappy then. I was like, yeah, I remember it was crappy, but I would take that over what we have now. So
It got worse. I use the comparison with the Star Wars movies. I don't
yeah,
know if you agree or
yes,
disagree, but what I say,
yeah,
it's like the prequels came out, everyone hated the
I
prequels.
know,
Sequels came out, sequels managed to be even worse.
I
And I was like,
know,
oh, the prequels are
agree.
still the worst. It's like, no,
No,
I think you should watch the new stuff again. I think it did. I still think the prequels are bad,
yeah,
but I also think it then got worse. And
yeah,
that's the important sort of stepping stone that sometimes gets overlooked in these sorts of conversations because you'll see people come back of like, well, yeah, 2001, that New Hampshire race, everyone was complaining about dirty air. It's like, okay, yes, but just
yeah,
it's the sort of the same surface level comparisons that you see when in arguments of the playoffs. It's like, well, the best team doesn't always win the Super Bowl. Best team doesn't always win the NASCAR championship. It's like, well, okay, on the surface level, yeah, but then look into the detail. What does that actually mean? Super Bowl, that meant you lost to one team because for 60 minutes, your team could not
yeah.
put a good enough game together.
Hmm.
We look at the NASCAR. Oh, Dirty Air in 2001 was bad. Well, what would that be in comparison to? Dirty Air in 2000 and before.
Hmm.
Once you get back to like the 90s, the early 90s, there's dirty air isn't even really something that is quantifiable or that teams are even looking to improve because it's just
Hmm.
not that much of an issue and it's not really noticeable.
No,
So, of course, when you go from no dirty air to a little bit of dirty air, you're going to feel it like, whoa, all
yeah,
of a sudden you're feeling something where there's nothing. And now there's just so much.
I know.
It's cascaded.
Um, well, before we get into the Gen 7 to close off the points talk real quick, uh,
Mhm.
I I don't want NASCAR to do this, but if you're going to do a playoff style system, you have to abide by what the ball and stick sport teams do. So if there's going to be 16 people in the playoffs, when playoffs come, there is only 16 cars on the track. And
I'd agree with
when you
that.
have eliminations, you have to eliminate. And when you get to the final four, there's just four cars on the track. And I don't think that's very fun. But if you want a quote unquote playoffs, you have to abide by those rules because, like you were saying, all these other guys that aren't racing for the championship, they're just out there. They can cause oil leaks, they can cause cautions, they can cause anything to mess up your race when in baseball, basketball, hockey, and football, you're going against one versus one. If that team messes up, that helps you out. There's
Yep.
not that doesn't equate in racing
I
because
agree. At no point
oh,
during the 2007 Super Bowl with the 16 no pick, at no point could the Miami Dolphins have stormed the field and laid a late hit on Tom Brady. At no
correct.
point could that have happened.
Yeah. So they either need to go to a full season points or figure out something that is very close to or equivalent to a full season points,
Mm.
then playoffs. And I just don't think you can eliminate people fully because I know everyone compares, you know, hey, look at the point standings now because they have the Winston Cup point system out there, and they're like
Mm.
they wouldn't race like that, and it's like yeah, you're probably right. Maybe they wouldn't race like that, but if you go slap the um, point system that we use right now, the playoffs back in the quote unquote 1992 best championship ever, Alan Quickie doesn't even make the final four. He went
Yeah.
on such a run in those last, I think it was six, seven, six, 7 or 6 races.
He wrecked
Yeah,
at Dover with five
yeah,
or six
yeah,
races to go, and he was in almost a 300-point
yeah.
hole and he made it back up.
I know he made it back up. And if we would have been doing our playoffs, if you go
He
put the
would have just been
playoffs,
locked out.
he would have been locked out and never would have been able had a chance at the championship. So as much as people are like, oh, they wouldn't race like that, like I get that, but he would have been eliminated. Like there would have been no Alan Quickie great story of him beating Bill Elliott by basically one lap difference because he got the five bonus points
Yeah,
extra. So
I
like,
agree. And the another fact there is, well, oh, they would have raced different. Well, now you end up the argument that sometimes you see of like, oh, no one ever raced for the win. That was always happy to
oh
settle with
yeah.
second. Alan Kulwicki was racing his heart out.
Mhm.
He didn't settle for second. Bill Elliott ended up winning that last race. Alan didn't
Yeah.
settle for second. he was stuck in selling. He would have much rather won the race and won
Yeah.
by more than just 10 points, but he
Mhm.
couldn't keep up with Bill. But what he was able to do those earlier weeks by just grinding out every position he could because every point mattered,
Yeah.
that's what ended up getting him the championship. And my last thought on the, oh, they would have raced different is I think there is a window, I think there is a margin of error that can be used when you're discussing applying different points formats to current points formats,
Mhm.
especially now that we're in the stage era and some drivers will literally sacrifice finishing position, sacrifice the win in name of scoring points.
Yeah.
Funny how I thought that was supposed to stop. You'll see, I think that creates the biggest dichotomy. But when we're looking at, say, specifically Jeff Gordon's hypothetical titles, just to use a
Yeah.
couple examples, and I'll have another counter example. When you're talking about margins that would be 150, 200, or in the example of 2007, I believe it would have been 320, 328
Mhm.
points, you can't out strategy that level of pure pace. And
Yeah.
I know, like you mentioned a little bit earlier, what Jimmy and Chad would do is they would build up a decent amount of points, but then use a lot of races as test sessions, especially once you got into the summer months. They try unique setups because by that point, if you're top three in points, you're pretty much safe as long as you
Yeah.
don't collapse multiple weeks in a row.
Mhm.
And they were able to use that to then hit the ground running because another flaw of that original points format and something that I prefer about today's chase, the seeding from 2004 to 2006 was
Yeah.
brutal.
Yeah.
It
I would
was
agree with
like
that.
no matter what, it was 5 points between each point position when you started at New Hampshire. And it's like, whoa. So you
Yeah.
definitely wanted to enter the playoffs like
Yeah.
eighth in order to get all that eliminated. But when you're talking about, oh, they would race different, 320, that's about two full races worth.
Mhm.
What we're looking at today with Zilich and Corey Heim obviously being the best driver in the truck
Yep.
or Xfinity series. You really going to try and tell me that the other drivers racing different would lead to a different outcome? I'm not trying to say the driver who wins the most races should necessarily win the championship. I don't think that would be
No.
fun. And I think, if anything, you'd end up with scenarios where it's a lot more likely
Mhm.
that the championship gets locked up super early. Because if you have a season where, let's say, one guy wins 8 races and no one else wins more than two, well, you're going to be looking at a championship that gets locked up well over a month early when no one else has the opportunity to win that many races to catch up.
Yeah.
I also feel like it's just it the scenarios where it is applicable are not that many. One example that I do like is 2006. If we simply applied the Latford format to the 2006
Yeah.
season, I believe Matt Kenseth would have won by 1 point. Yes, that is
Yeah.
absolutely a season where you can say, oh, if they raced different, it would have ended up differently. Yeah, you definitely can say that. But
Yeah.
as that margin increases, it becomes a lot higher. I think the margin today is, at least me personally, if someone wins a championship in Latford by more than 175 points, more than one race, I'd say it's pretty safe to assume that
Yeah. They would.
at the very least, that champion
Mhm.
would have actually happened. And I don't think there'd be that much to change that. And then once you get to the 250, 300 point margins, it's like, okay,
Sure.
you can't just hide behind, oh, they would have raced different. No, no, there's no argument. It's
No.
just let it be. Just, just, just take the L. It's
Yeah.
okay. It's okay.
Yeah. Um, yeah. No, that's we could just continue on talking about the points, but I want to get to talking about a little bit of the Gen 7 before we shut this thing down.
Of course.
Um, so maybe we'll continue another talk on the points because there's
Sorry
so
it's
much more
gone too long.
there's so much more I could talk about, and we could both maybe try and come up with something, but it just there's a lot that should happen, can happen, and it's the only thing that is talked about is they uh, they wouldn't race as hard and all the stuff we were saying. So it's like, sure, that's
Very least,
exactly
at the very least, it's a very inexpensive fix should they
yes,
decide to pursue it. And obviously, I'd love to talk to you more about this specific issue later on down the line. Now, the Gen 7.
yes. So it is clearly clear as day. Like I won't even bat an eye. And if someone wants to show me some better facts to back that up, this is arguably the worst generation of car that we've had. And the people that are like, the COT, it was a terrible car for the first like year and a half, but then they did figure it out. And it did
Yeah.
create some really, really good racing. And this car has did the opposite. It had two probably really good years, and the last 2 to 3 now have been bad. And everyone that says that we get great racing on mile-and-a-half tracks, I would argue to say it's just good racing. It's not great racing. It just basically slinkies them. That's all it does. It's just a slinky.
Mhm.
It just keeps people around, keeps good racing. I won't say anything more on that. But if you look at every generation, the four types of tracks, intermediates, short tracks, road courses, and plate races, they're at least good with three out of the four. And then they maybe like suffer with one of them. The Gen 7
Mhm.
does arguably one good and the rest not good. And it's clear as day to me. And I don't know what your thoughts on it is, but it either needs to be overhauled big time. And I don't know if NASCAR wants to do that because it's going to cost them a lot of money, but it's their car. They designed it. Um, or do they scrap it? But then what do you do? Bring up the Xfinity car? I don't know. Like it's this is the most expensive piece, but arguably this is the most important piece. Like I'm not gonna say that leaving the point system as it is and then just fixing the car would fix it altogether. But if you got the perfect car, it probably might could. It's not guaranteed, but this is the most expensive piece, and NASCAR doesn't want to do anything. And obviously, they just said that they're going to have 750 horsepower, which is 80 more horsepower than they have now, which is
It's just
great. It's
something.
it's great. I like
It's
the
directionally positive.
I like the way we're going, but that that's literally nothing. That's a drop in the pan, and it's
Yeah.
like you
I
couldn't
mean,
go
we'll
at least
see, but
850. Like just give us,
oh,
yeah. I don't know. What are your
yeah.
thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are numerous.
Yeah.
To I suppose sort of start with the end again. I There is no cheap fix to
No.
the next gen. There were cheap and quick fixes to the Gen 6 that were largely just ignored,
Mhm.
but there is so much that was deliberately changed about the Gen 7 compared to the Gen 6 or any prior stock car design that it's really hard to sort of you've taken a circle peg, round hole.
Mhm.
You've changed the peg to a square on purpose, and now you're trying to change that square back into a circle to fit back into the hole that didn't change.
Yep.
And because if we just go off the list of this sort of design components about the next gen that are different from prior cars.
Mhm.
All right, starting with some of the obvious. We've gotten a flat, a sealed underbody with a rear diffuser.
Mhm.
That's one. We've got wider tires. That's two. We've got larger rims to accommodate for larger brakes. That's
Mhm.
two and three. And if you want to count four, we've got the changed lug nuts, which are objectively a safety step backwards. And I will tell you, it is not fun to see a tire fly over
No.
your head. And
No.
ideally, you want to minimize the chances of that happening.
Yeah.
And in the 4 years we've had the almost four complete seasons we've had the next gen, we've seen as many wheels fall off at speed as we did with the last 20 years of the old car. But I suppose that's neither here nor there. But all right, so we've got that's what now 4 or 5 changes. We've got the flat floor, we've got wide tires, we've got bigger brakes, we've got bigger rims, we've got the lug nuts, we've also got different gearing. We have a fifth speed now,
Hmm.
for some reason,
Hmm.
and it's sequentially shifted. It's not H pattern.
Yep.
Now, the difference between sequential and H pattern is much more of a sort of design preference, at least to my understanding. The bigger issue is not necessarily how the gears are shifted, it's the fact that there's a fifth gear. The ratios are so tight that that means shifting is an option at a lot of tracks under a mile and a half where
Yep.
it wouldn't have been in the past.
Hmm.
And and then we get into the composite bodies, which are really generally still a bit too stiff. Thankfully, we've made the rear of the car a lot more flexible than it was that first season in 2022.
Yep.
Way too many cushions, an unacceptable amount of concussions from that first 2022 season. And it's improved, but when we're looking at all of that in totality, you start to realize, and of course, horsepower. We're down to 670.
Yep.
Next year, it'll be back up to 750 at the
Ooh.
short tracks, but 670 horsepower is not a lot of horsepower, especially when you consider those other changes, such as the underbody that creates a lot of grip. Is it necessarily the same amount of downforce as a super high downforce car? Maybe not, but I don't think it's as low downforce as a lot of media members try and portray it is, because these
Yep.
cars are gripped up, gripped up. They behave as if they're high downforce cars because the downforce is like a light switch. The second you have that diffuser outside of its sort of maximum angle of yaw, which I think is like 2 or 3 degrees, the second you're beyond that ideal point for air to be flowing under it, all of the downforce goes away. And that's why we see some of the things we see with the dirty air issues.
Hmm.
When you're looking at all of that in totality, it's like, man, I mean, if you're talking about fixing this car, turning this square peg back into a round hole, each of those components is a big expense. Each of those
Yep.
components is a very big expense. And it's the sort of expense that NASCAR can no longer say, teams figure it out.
Yep.
I think there was definitely a problem with how much teams were spending on the cars back in the day, but I don't think this has necessarily remedied it, or at the very least, it's introduced other variables. So
Hmm.
much of this car is from single source parts, like these single vendors who sign deals with NASCAR to be providing these parts and pieces to the teams. It's one thing to just tell the teams to figure it out because you as NASCAR are kind of in control of the dynamic there. It's another thing to tell Dollara, yeah, you guys got to redesign this part of the body or
Yeah.
prepare to not use the diffuser or whoever makes the wheels and tires. Oh yeah, and the brakes. Oh yeah, you gotta shrink these down back to the old
Oh,
spec of 5 lugs and whatnot.
yeah.
Those are big expenses, and those are big expenses you're not lobbing onto teams who don't really have that much say.
Yep.
You're lobbing these onto these very big investment partners who,
Hmm.
at this point in the sport, are very much the backbone of you being management, continuing to stay afloat.
Yep.
And it's a box of their own creation. Like so many things, I believe it's an unforced error with good intentions that has left the situation worse than what it had been before it was implemented.
Yep.
All of that's a long way of saying I don't think part of the reason why every so often you'd see people say, oh, just run Xfinity is when you're looking at all those changes, it legitimately might be cheaper to scrap the car and just run a modified Xfinity car because the only modification you'd need to make an Xfinity car the Cup car is 900 horsepower.
Yep.
And some of it's also we as fans, there's not that much transparency into how much these things actually do cost. So the best we can all do is just speculate. We can look at what the car's doing and build our opinions of the car based on how it behaves in traffic, how it behaves on the race, how we think the racing is. But when it comes to actually fixing it and proposing solutions, it's always like, well, we can't do that. It would cost too much. I don't know how much it would cost. I don't want it to be. I don't want to have to know. I wouldn't mind finding out, but it's not my job. My job, for lack of a better word, is consuming your product and paying money either to you directly or to your partners in order to consume your product. And if your product is such that the fans are demanding big changes, well, look, fair or not, telling fans, "Oh, we can't do it because it costs too much money," that's not that's not going to
No.
go too far,
Nope.
especially in specific scenarios such as horsepower, where it's like, well, the reason we can't do more than 750 is because now the engines have to last for two whole races rather than just one, or at
Mhm.
least two races, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Well, just like the next gen car, teams can only have seven cars for each number,
Hmm.
but each individual, whereas in the past they'd have like 20, whereas now each individual car is four times as expensive.
Hmm.
You have a quarter of the total vehicles, but they cost four times as much. You've end up with the same expense. I again, I'm not privy to all the financial details, but my basic understanding and my observation is something very similar has occurred in the engine programs and the engine bills for a lot of these teams where look, it's yeah, each motor lasts a lot longer, but also each motor is now way more expensive. Have you really saved the teams any money? And another part where the oh it costs too much excuse just falls flat on the fans is I guys, you're some of the best teams engineers in the country. You still have incredibly high bills, and I saw you guys make motors that make 900 horsepower and didn't blow up every single race. I saw it with my own eyes. It was just 11 years ago.
Yeah.
It's not that long. And I can only imagine the technology and the knowledge of how to build motors, especially motors that last, has changed and improved in that time. And they just tell me, "Oh no, it can't be done." I can't help but say I can't help but lose sympathy to whatever financial strain that might be placed on you because it's like, well, you guys, of course, either being the owners, the RTA, or NASCAR themselves, people within NASCAR,
Hmm.
this is another box of your own creation that you've put yourself in.
Yeah.
Are you going to step out of the box or are you going to stay in the box? And it's just a really tough issue because there's so much about the driving dynamics that are different with the next gen that are just not easy fixes. They've tried to put it all on Goodyear, and Goodyear has finally put a tire that actually does a decent job, I think, compensating for all of the next gen's shortcomings. So I have to give them a lot of credit. It would not have been cheap.
Hmm.
And I imagine NASCAR would have either paid them handsomely for it or added a few extra years to whatever Goodyear's contract was, being the official tire supplier, in order to recoup that R&D cost. But it's just there's just so much work left to do. I I, I really don't know. I really don't know if the best decision would just be to ride it out for a few years until you completely redesign the car again. That might be the only option that we can hope for.
Yeah. No.
Sorry for the long-winded
No.
answer there, but
It's
it's a complicated issue. There's a lot
it's
of parts and pieces that are moving,
yeah.
and it
No.
all
Well,
ended up with we've got a race car that really sucks everywhere except mile and a halfs.
yeah.
And even then at the mile and a halfs, that much it's not that much better than mile and a half racing was before they started cutting
No.
horsepower, nor is
Yeah.
it that much better than the mile and a half racing we see every Saturday. I
No.
really love the Xfinity package
Yeah.
for the past couple of years. And that's not a purpose-built mile and a half car.
No.
That's just a COT 2.0 or a COT 1.5 that's
Hmm.
had a couple of aero tweaks in the past 15 years.
Yeah. And they need to do something like you were saying sooner than later, rather
Mm,
than riding this out because
yeah.
they're already having issues with Xfinity because usually Xfinity, you know, gobbles up whatever comes down their pipeline, and
Yeah.
you can't really pass down a next gen car down to the lower series. Nor would I want them to start running that same car. That would help
I
out
am
them, but
I am terrified that NASCAR will either next gen the Xfinity cars or turn them electric within
uh,
before the end of the decade.
yeah,
That is one of those hard
yeah,
lines. I am done if that
yeah,
ends up happening.
no.
But
I'm with you on that. I will say that they do need to do something like now. Like I get the whole point standings. They want to make sure it's more of a we're going to stick to this and this is what it's going to be for the next 20 years, something like that.
yeah,
But this isn't that. This needs to be fixed now. And
yeah,
I think a lot of their issues, and Dale Jr. has said this in the past, a lot of their answers and everything they're looking for is in the past. And what they need to do, and what they used to do in the early 2000s, um, Gen 4 cars, between Ford, Chevy, Dodge, and Pontiac, their bodies, their spoilers were not all the same. They were not a cookie cutter
yes,
thing. They were not a even COT when that came out, and they were all the same, and the only difference was the stickers on it. What they did, and they needed to adapt this. Yeah, it's going to cost NASCAR probably a little more upfront because they're going to have to do the research, they're going to have to develop stuff, they're going to have to stay ahead of it. But if they stay ahead of it, which they did do that in the Gen 4 era, and that's why the Gen 4 era succeeded and did so well. And that's why people look back at it and be like, this is one of the best racing, the best people, the best drivers, blah, 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 whatever you want to say. But it was because, and I believe it was in 2000 for their first Daytona race, Ford just slapped the shit out of everyone. And Dale
changed the
Earnhardt,
shock package that year, and
yeah,
The Ford had a new body,
yep,
and Chevy had a new body. The
and
Pontiacs were decent, the Chevys were awful, and the Fords were lights out.
yeah, and they were just knocking the doors off everyone. And Dale Earnhardt was complaining about it. A lot of the Chevy guys were. And what did
Mhm.
NASCAR do? They went into the wind tunnel with the Chevys, Ford, and Pontiac, and they got the numbers down, and they basically tried to counteract. I don't know the exact numbers, but if one was having more downforce, they would, try and give them less, or depending on what they were hindering on, to even out the playing field. So when Dodge came in, I know Dodge was known in the very beginning. They had a lot of horsepower, um, but I believe I can't remember. It was either really low downforce or really high downforce. I can't remember which one.
They had front downforce
Was it?
issues for the first half of
Okay.
2001. Dodge did because
Yeah.
they were largely building off of a Ford template, but the
Okay.
Ford people didn't give them obviously the Ford people didn't give them all the best
Yeah.
notes.
Yeah.
And Dodge in mid 2001, Dodge was allowed to get an extra 2 or 3 inches bump out on their
On there.
nose
Okay.
to increase front downforce.
Yeah. So, but they were always innovating. NASCAR was always putting their
Yeah, they were
fingers,
making changes.
yes, to help that. And we saw that a little bit when Ford and Toyota came out with their new bodies. And
Mhm.
that's on the OEMs. The OEMs have always done that throughout the years. But NASCAR always had their fingers in there doing something. They always were, taking Roush's engines, Yates engines, Hendricks, uh, any other fucking ones that were out there at the time, and just dynoing them just to see what everyone's horsepower was doing.
Yeah, there was dynos every couple of
Yes.
months.
So what they needed to do in hindsight, and what they can do for hopefully what they do with this next generation, is give building back to the teams, but give them areas that they can only work in. Like, hey,
Open the box up a
yeah,
bit. I
yes,
agree.
open the box, but be like, hey, we're not going to allow you to. I don't know what the exact thing is, but only certain things. You can only work in these certain boxes. If you go outside of there, you're in trouble. You can only build exactly how they have it now, where they can only have 7 cars. Give them a number. Hey, you can only have 2 super speedway cars per. Let's just use Hendrick for 2 super speedway cars for Kyle Larson, two for William Byron, two for Bob. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? I don't know the exact number, but they can make the number. So it doesn't allow the teams to overspend on certain things. They're always going to
Well,
use the money. They're always going to find a way to blow money. They will. But
I don't think there's a way to stop them from overspending
no,
unless there's a cost cap.
yeah, they're always going to overspend. I'm saying, but if you tell them you can't build more than this amount of vehicles, and if we catch you
Mhm.
building more than, you're going to get a fine and points penalty. They're not going to. They have to step in and do the due diligence, and they have to be the police, the cop. They have to be the bad guy at times. But building a car, even though I agree with you, it was in good intentions and it was hoping to be a good thing, you can't build a Lego car in Denny Hamlin's terms to have it be equal and be great at the same time because you won't get all that.
You also can't just build something that ended up being this bad.
Yeah.
And I know there's and I've got a couple of things to say to this in terms of
Yeah.
the like what ends up happening is generally speaking, the best engineers go to the teams before they go to NASCAR. So
Mhm.
there's an element of NASCAR's people not necessarily being the best, obviously still very smart people, but as evidenced by some mistakes and some errors that probably should have been obvious in the design of this car, there were some missteps there. But as to the lack of iteration on this car that we've seen so far, and every little change is both a little change and b feels like NASCAR's drags kicking and screaming into doing. I think that comes down to all of these single source contracts. All of those, and like you said, like OEMs have always had a hand on the bodies. That's true,
Mhm.
but the OEM's influence is larger now than it ever was.
It has.
And I think a lot of that is because of the limitations placed on the team end that were designed to cut costs. But when you figure that there's you can't touch the bodies on these cars, period.
Yeah.
That means designing a body that's good cutting through the air that all goes to the manufacturers. So now they're spending a lot of money and
Mhm.
they're going to want a lot in return. All right. And that also means that's not something you can change very easily or very quickly,
Mhm.
even with small things like spoilers, because those are all, on the one hand, those are all, again, spec. And you need to find someone who, rather than a team fab shop who maybe it's a 4 car team and then they have a 2 car satellite, you need to make enough spoilers for 6 cars. Now you've got one company that needs to make enough spoilers for 36 cars plus potential open entries.
Yeah.
That becomes much harder to do fast. And these sorts of things is, again, box of their own creation, a sort of unforeseen consequence that really should have been foreseen of. So much of the design of this car was locked in from basically maybe not day one, but locked in before they did any sort of on track testing. Like I remember Denny Hamlin said at one point on his podcast, the car was almost complete before they actually ran more than a
Mhm.
couple of them out on the track at once.
Yeah.
And then they realized, uh-oh,
Yeah.
we made a mistake. And I think that ends up being a microcosm of just you can't grow by cutting. And there's too much that has been cut out of the team's aspect in this. And I think
Mhm.
it's negatively impacted the race weekends, the racing, and in this case, the car. Because, like you said, in 2001, the Dodges started off slow.
Mhm.
Mid-season, they got an aerodynamic update by NASCAR, and NASCAR let the teams build the bodies a little bit different. The teams didn't have much trouble doing that.
Yep.
In 2000, that super speedway, NASCAR essentially brought a different, changed the super speedway package every single race that season.
It did. Yeah.
That 2000 Daytona 500 had, because in 1999 teams were running the rear of the car so low,
They were.
kind of like what we
Yep.
see in the next gen everywhere now.
They're
They're
like,
running it so low to get the spoiler out of the air, and it looks really cool. But
yeah.
NASCAR's like, we want to stop this because it's getting ridiculous.
Yeah.
And there's a photo going around there of looking
Yeah.
at Jeff Gordon's car from the rear, and
Yeah.
it is ridiculous. The top of the hood is higher than the top of the rear spoiler.
Yeah.
It's absurd. So NASCAR said, "Art, no,
Yeah.
we are mandating the travel on these front and rear shocks."
Yeah.
And then the Daytona 500 was awful.
Yeah.
So then at Talladega, NASCAR said, "All right, the rear shocks are still mandatory, but you guys can mess with the front shocks." It was better, but then when they went back to Daytona, Daytona still had problems.
Hmm.
And the 2000 Pepsi 400 was not that much better than the Daytona 500. It was still just a Ford dominance. And going around on the internet is a video of an interview with Jeff Gordon and Dale Earnhardt talking about, hey, it's all this blade the Chevys can handle, but the Fords just cut through the air so well with their bodies that there's nothing we can do until we get long enough in the race that the tires wear out. So then they came to Talladega with a complete revamp of the aerodynamics of the car to equalize the amount of drag, to increase the amount of drag and
Hmm.
equalize it more across the manufacturers. And it's one of the best plate packages we've ever seen. That all happened. All of those changes, significant changes, happened within one
1 year.
season.
Yeah, I know.
And that's just not something that's possible now, which is why so much of it's been pushed onto Goodyear and why it got so frustrating where it's like, oh, NASCAR is bringing 3 teams to test this sort of weird new anti-splitter thing at Richmond.
Yeah,
Comes by, they test for a day and a half, months go by, and then they're like, oh no, we're actually not doing that. It's like,
yeah,
that's it?
yeah,
Like, it's just, and I don't foresee, I think that sort of innovation can happen again in the motor department of give the teams 1 year to say, hey, 2027, you guys are going to build motors without tapered spacers. You can build as many as you want, but there's no tapered spacers.
yeah,
Then I think that's something I think you could see to, at the very least, make clean air harder to take advantage of.
correct.
And that's something that would positively affect the racing at short tracks, especially, but also intermediates, of making it not a guarantee that clean air is just going to seal your race.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I know there's no quick fix, but
Mm.
I agree with you. If they wanted to help this car with by any means, what you were saying with the engine, have the teams do that, and then this will cost them money, but it
Spend a lot of money.
it
There is a point where it's like I want the teams
like
to have enough money, but there is a point where
yeah,
you can't grow by cutting.
the rims, they
Mm-hmm.
of course I would like them to not have as narrow as sidewall because it gives the drivers more feeling in there. But if they
And it
want,
lets you have interliners, which doesn't
yes,
beach them.
yep. So yeah, they could go two ways with this, and they could either make the rims smaller again, and that means you got to make the brakes smaller again, or you leave the brakes
Mm-hmm.
the same size, leave the tire or the rim the same size, but you narrow the rim up. Because narrowing the rim up, you'll still be able to put it onto the assembly and not affect the
There
um
might still be issues with brakes there. I think groove tires wouldn't be the worst, but
well,
that would another thing. That'd be another investment where it's like,
as
man, it's unfortunate that it
as long
ended up
as
needing
long as
this.
they develop, it's just the rim. So
Mm-hmm.
BBS just has to remake the rim to make it narrower, but then where the contact of where it goes onto the hub, they can bring that in or out so it doesn't affect the
Doesn't affect the
brakes.
braking and suspension
So that yeah,
components in
so they don't
there.
have to do that. It just literally narrows it up,
Mm-hmm.
and you add more horsepower on there, you're gonna have more off brake time. And we've seen that when there's off brake time with these cars, it does produce a better product usually.
Throttle time, off
Yes.
throttle time, but
So I think if
I
they,
almost want more on brake time
yeah,
because we
yeah,
even at short tracks, the braking zone is so
yeah,
short. That's part of what
it
I
is.
think makes the passing difficult. The braking zone's so short and the brakes are so good. It's
Yeah,
really hard to mess it up. And it's independent rear suspension, so you're not going to have wheel hop.
true. Yeah. But
But
I don't know. I feel like if they
I
did those two things, you're gonna help it. It's not gonna fix it. But then
there's a lot of things that can be done to help. There's no
I
one quick
yeah,
fix, and the best time to start these fixes would have been yesterday. The second best time is today and sooner than later,
yeah,
especially when the roadmap's long. It's like, all right,
yeah.
we're
But
we're at the end of year 4.
yeah,
If these things took a couple years to change, it would have been great if you started planning for big changes a couple years ago.
yeah,
Just a little too short-sighted.
yeah. So I don't know. They just need to do something like that and then get going on the next design as soon as possible because
Yeah,
I, you, if you don't want to spend that much money, I think that's probably your cheapest, cost-effective way to help the racing. It's not going to fix it, but it's gonna help it. It's gonna do more than what they've done in the last 4 years. So,
I agree.
but
My biggest worry with a Gen 8 would be, although this would be a worry that could be applied to later seasons of the Gen 7 would be change with the motor rules and BOP regulations, because
Oh,
I know Jim's a big fan of IMSA.
yeah.
And I the Schrodinger's Honda sort of in this little box that may or may not want to join NASCAR in the near or not near future,
Hmm.
but would not be willing to build a V8 like Toyota did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I I think I think some of this is applicable to my dislike of the playoffs, but it becomes better at selling yourself when you can differentiate yourself.
Hmm.
NASCAR has made a lot of efforts on the point system to try and reduce the difference between it and football, which then just means a lot of diehards see it as not as racing and they don't like it.
Yep.
And casuals see that, oh, this is doing a bad job of trying to imitate football or basketball. So I'm less interested in this because I can just watch a similar product that's better
Yeah.
in basketball or football. And I think some of that will apply to decisions they make sort of as far as the car and the racing are concerned of they built this Gen 7 to be a lot like V8 supercars, which is really cool. I like V8 supercars,
Hmm.
but that's not NASCAR.
No.
And there's this sort of a lot of 20 years of executives feeling like they would rather be running a different sport or even just a different motorsport. And I worry that that's something that we still haven't seen the end of that on the cup level of
No.
getting rid of. We've already moved away from the 4-speed H pattern, that old 60s Chevy truck rear end. And that's neither here nor there. At the end of the day, I don't know how big of a difference those specific changes have made on racing, but I would prefer them. And if we could return to them, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I worry that's another thing that we could see within the engines and sort of leveraged as oh, this is how we're giving you what you asked for, but not in the way you asked for it, of hybridization or Honda coming in with turbo V6s of, oh, now we're back to 1,000 horsepower. To which I say, well, okay, great, but are you going to try and tell me that somehow building entirely new hybrid components or having a new manufacturer come in and build an entirely new type of engine is somehow cheaper than dusting off that 2014 notebook and just building those
Yeah.
300, what is it, 358 or 368 cubic inch motors that they've run for many years? And I think Chevy has used the same engine architecture since 2011.
Yeah.
You can't just, that somehow, that is, if your arguments for not doing these things are cost, why would one of your potential solutions be a very large and very hard to estimate future expense?
Mhm.
And that just comes off to me as a fan as just a something I don't love.
Yeah. So the ownership of NASCAR obviously is another huge issue of why we are where we are today.
Yeah.
Um, Stemming back to Brian France starting this whole muck and where we are now with basically Jim France, Steve Phelps, Ben Kennedy, and Steve O'Donnell. There are a few other characters in there too, but I
Mm-hmm.
would say that those four are probably the top um, people that are running slash influencing slash can do something about what's going on. And I just I don't know about Jim France. I don't know enough about him. I feel like he's very invested in his IMSA, and I think he's just here because his last name is France. And Steve Phelps, I don't really like at all. Not as a person, but I just don't like him in the position he is. I don't think he has a very good vision for what NASCAR can be or should be. And Ben Kennedy, I think, has some good points here and there. Um, I feel like out of all of them, I would keep Ben Kennedy around more. And Steve O'Donnell drives me absolutely insane, especially the last thing he was on with Dale Jr. on his podcast a few days ago. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I saw a few of those hot clips, and he's just he's insufferable, and I feel like he's a yes man, And I think if all four of them were gone, we got a fresh new slate of people. I would prefer to have like a Dale Jr., a Mark Martin, someone of that statue in NASCAR, but I know that that's a lot on their plate and a lot that they probably don't want. But I
Mhm.
feel like if one of those people were in there, we would probably not be where we're at. And a lot of these people, I think, are yes men or trying to chase the almighty dollar. And money's important, but at the same time, so are the fans. And a lot of these dudes clearly don't care about the fans because they lie to our face. They continually just say things that aren't true, where they say, yeah, at the end of the year when they come out in their little conference and they always say, everything's great, we're doing good, numbers are great, but then they didn't know, don't release any of the other numbers that they used to release back in, I believe, 2013 and 2014 when they used to release all the money that drivers would get and all that. That was always fun as a fan to go see, oh, look,
Oh yeah,
Ward
you
Burton got
get
like $40,000 this week. Like, not that I cared, but it
yeah,
was
yeah.
fun to
It's like
see all those numbers. Like, I used to come up
last
and,
place got 12
yeah, yeah,
grand. No, yeah, they that
yeah,
was something the RTA put a
yeah,
stop to with the first charter format.
yeah.
Purses and the exact payouts were released up through the end of 2015, and attendance figures were released up through about 2012 or 2013.
Yep.
I wonder why you'd want to stop showing those. But
So I don't know what your thoughts are on these guys, but that's if they all walked away from the sport and we got new people, even if these people that were coming in might not be any better, I think we just need new, fresh people in there. But I would prefer to have someone like a Mark Martin, Dale Jr., someone, even some of these crew chiefs. They don't have to be a driver, just someone that has been in the sport, that has seen it, that's not afraid to go for it. Like, hey, if you're wrong, just admit you're wrong. Everyone messes up, but don't lie to our face. Don't sugarcoat things. Don't like we can see through the bullshit. You can clearly see by the numbers. You can see by everything that it's not working, and you're not helping the situation by coming out and lying to our face, or just beating around the bush and not telling the exact story. But we're like, okay, what's going on here?
when you're running a business like this that's forward facing, you're selling a product, you want to be able to control the narrative around your product. And you want that narrative to be positive.
Yep.
But there comes a point where you just can't you just can't ignore it anymore. And interestingly enough, at least based on what we've seen on reactions of people on Twitter, on podcasts, and whatnot, big kick in the ass was the ratings for New Hampshire, the first race of the playoffs, which
Yeah,
were
I saw that.
even by USA standards were disappointing. And
It,
I found that a little bit interesting. It's like, was this finally the straw that broke the camel's back after all these? But I think when it comes to the specific people in leadership positions, I would not mind cleaning house. I would also think, no matter what ends up happening, I think there's a real place for an increased presence of former drivers and former crew chiefs in uh, assistance. The exact word escapes me, in sort of advisory roles
yeah.
within NASCAR leadership and with much more of a voice in the directions, particularly directions in terms of the car and the racing.
Hmm.
I think it would benefit a lot if there were essentially more racers, capital R racers, in the C suite. As to the particular executives that we have today, I don't want to blame everything continually on Brian France because I think that's a bit unfair to him. And although most of his changes have proven to be the wrong ones, he brought some good to the sport. I give him a lot of credit for the TV deal he negotiated back in 1999 for the 2001 season, and I admire him for trying.
Hmm.
But I think the problem is we've ended up in a in a sort of kind of limbo ever since Brian France retired, because in many ways, Jim France is, at least publicly, the opposite of Brian, in
Yeah.
that he's not public at all.
Hmm.
We'll only, it feels like barely even once a month, we'll hear any sort of direct quote from Jim. And very rarely it's on anything directly related to the sport, but we'd see statements in terms of expressing condolences for the passing of a former driver, crew chief, things of that nature, and very, very little about Jim's actual opinions on the state of the sport and the state of the drivers.
Hmm.
I really have a hard time. I'm perfectly open with people because naturally people will infer what may or may not be directives from Jim,
Hmm.
but it's just another example of the fans really just not knowing what's going on and using then people like Steve O'Donnell, Steve Phelps, and Ben Kennedy end up in large ways being kind of the NASCAR mouthpiece. And it's a little bit difficult to sort of distinguish them in terms of what roles, like what actual changes they are behind the scenes
Yeah.
spearheading. To on that nature, though, the reason I brought up Brian France is the way these sorts of businesses go, especially family businesses. Obviously, you have the immediate family
Hmm.
running the business, and they're always basically going to be the head honchos.
Yep.
But within that, when it comes to promoting people to positions of importance and positions to be able to take over when you retire, or in Brian France's case, get all that happened there.
He retired.
But yeah, all that happened there. You end up what ends up happening is the heads of the sport, the heads of the company will want to hire and promote people who think like them.
Yep.
And you end up with rooms full of yes men.
Correct.
And while there isn't quite as much of a king for these yes men to say yes to, I believe most of the current executive suite, people like Phelps, O'Donnell, who were hired or promoted a lot during the Brian France era to
Hmm.
be in a position where they have a lot of say on the direction of the sport from 2018, 2019 through today, is because they shared a lot of Brian France's vision.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would be, while I'm not sure it would be literally a necessity
Hmm.
for the executive suite to clean house in order for these changes to be reversed. I think a big reason that a lot of these problems have gotten as dire as they've gotten is because a lot of the people in charge were stuck in the mindset of the early 2000s of how can we make this growing sport grow even bigger
Hmm.
long after many of those decisions have resulted in the sport really falling into a deep malaise. And within that sort of gaggle, rather than saying yes to the figurehead, they end
Hmm.
up saying yes to each other.
Hmm.
And there's an element of a disappointing, disappointingly out of touch attitude from a lot of these people. I remember, I believe it was maybe not quite a year ago, but Denny said on his podcast that Mike Ford was referring to everyone who's voicing out against things like the playoffs, it's all just bots. And now obviously there's different ways to take that. And of course you're running a company, you don't want to be presenting
Yeah.
externally a problem, but if that's if that is your internal mindset and your internal view on the situation, I think that was rather enlightening of you guys are not you're failing to see a lot of these issues that everyone sort of outside of the sport can see, including casuals. I don't know
Correct.
about you, but I do try to take a group of my high school friends to at least one race a year, and I have done so ever since the end of COVID.
Hmm.
We were originally supposed to go to Pocono in 2020, and that got canceled. And then we went in 21. We've gone every year since, and a lot of the sort of a lot of glaring turnoffs to a casual fan that someone deep in NASCAR might not immediately realize are things like the playoffs and even stages.
Hmm.
The stages, those yellows, that adds like a good 20 minutes to each race. And if you're just watching it on TV, it's like, well, great. It's like you've got two half times essentially, but instead of a 15-minute halftime show showing
Yeah.
highlights of the game and talking about the other games, it's just commercial, 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 commercial. Oh, a pit stop. Commercial, commercial, commercial. Oh, we're back going. And oh,
Hmm.
wait a minute. We're already 10 laps into stage two. What?
Yeah.
It's like starting the third quarter. It's like starting the third quarter after halftime and there's only 9 minutes on the clock.
Correct. Yeah.
You're losing game time. And then, of course, the playoffs. The playoffs are a lot easier to understand as iterations built atop the original 10 race chase. But if you don't already know that and you want to try to explain to somebody who's never encountered them before, there's a lot of nuance. For a topical, there's a Toyota's been running a lot of ads like Toyota Gazoo Racing,
I did see that.
both during IMSA coverage and during NASCAR race weekends. Of like, oh, you want to understand the NASCAR playoffs? You got to survive the pack, and you
Hmm.
win to advance, and then at the end, you got to outlast the field at Phoenix. And
Hmm.
that's all it is. Something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing. I don't
Yeah.
remember the exact commercial, but
I know what you're talking about.
it's giving a surface level presentation of a much more simple format that it actually ends up being in reality.
Hmm.
There really is a lot of moving parts within the playoff system that ends up being a turnoff for a brand new fan to understand. What you don't want to be presenting, if you want to be attractive to a casual viewer, you do not want to make the basically barrier to entry. You do not want to make the minimum level of understanding too high because then you just end up losing people, of people getting essentially overwhelmed by some information overload and deciding that they don't feel like it's worth the effort to understand it fully.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that's a major problem. And that's something that, by the sounds of it, maybe a few of these people in executive roles have started to realize.
Hmm.
But that's just another example of being out of touch because if you're within not just the NASCAR fandom or NASCAR injury, but in the building where these sorts of changes are discussed with at least some frequently, especially back when things like the playoffs were initially implemented,
Hmm.
you're familiar with the inside and outs and you get it.
Yeah.
You get it. You see that original vision that you would have shared with a man like Brian France, and it's harder to distance yourself from that vision when you're in a room full of other yes men. This is not unique to just the
No.
sport of NASCAR. This is something that you'll see play out in executive rooms of companies all over the place, not realizing problems until it's too late, not recognizing outside threats or opportunities because there's not enough dissenting opinions within the room to counter the current plan that's being put forward.
Yeah.
I guess all that being said, um, I think I think one of the it came out in one of the various court updates that somebody in a Toyota 2311 group chat said, "Oh, nothing's going to change until Jim dies."
Yeah.
I think that's I think that's a bit harsh. I understand why someone might think that, but I think that is a bit harsh. And I don't think that's not something they would be advocating for. I
Yeah.
understand why you'd get to that, but ideally, I don't think that is something that is necessary for change. And I do believe all, or at least most of these people in executive positions could be could be reasoned with and be presented compelling arguments to the contrary of what the current plans seem to be, especially in terms of things like inexpensive changes like the points formats. How do you sell that to future
Mhm.
sponsors? Well, I think back to one of the original criticisms of the 10 race chase that ended up seeing it expanded in 2007 to 12 drivers. There were a number of teams with big full time sponsors who were upset that because they missed the chase, they weren't talked about as much at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Notably, in 2005, Dale Jr. and Jeff Gordon missed the chase, and I believe Kevin Harvick did as well.
Yeah, I think
And
so.
then They kept it the same for '06, but then for 2007, they expanded it. That mindset was also part of the reason why the chase went to 16 drivers in 2014, because there were teams on the fringe who didn't like that after they were eliminated, they weren't talked about. And I think a really good way, and I believe a lot of these people in executive positions of either NASCAR or big investors into NASCAR could be, I think they could be reasoned with and presented with, there are good arguments to be made that no, you don't have to be, you don't have to continue with the sunk cost fallacy. There are ways that you can change your approach and regain lost ground and not lose big investors that aren't necessarily eyeballs.
Yeah. Yeah, it it's all three of these things. Well, I would say not really the points, but for sure the car and all these people that are running the sport. It's a lot more difficult to just, all right, we're on the right path
Yeah.
because you have so many more hurdles and so many more things that you have to jump through to do that. Um, you said a mouthful, but
I
it,
apologize.
hey,
I hope that was at least
no, it painted
mostly
it
comprehensible.
it was easy for me to follow, and I hope everyone else can follow it. But because it makes sense, and to kind of piggyback off how you bring some of your high school friends to the race, I think one of the best things that NASCAR still has going for them is the experience at the racetrack, and that can be
Agreed.
improved, and that is their bread and butter. Because people turning on a race, I don't have the exact number. I'm just throwing this out here because I'm just spitballing. 85% of the people that don't know anything about NASCAR turn on and like, ooh, look, they're going in circles. Watch these rednecks go in circles. That's fun.
Yeah.
400 laps? Nah. Change it on. They move on to the next thing. Or like, ooh, is there going to be a wreck? Ooh, let's see the wrecks. And
Yeah.
you're always going
Haven't
to have
seen
it.
action for a bit, watch it for 15 minutes and then
Yeah,
change the channel.
yeah,
No, I don't blame them. That's
yeah,
something you're kind of always going to have.
yeah.
That
You're
you're
always going
always
to
going
have
to
that.
have that person.
You're always going to have that. But that going to the track. So I have two buddies. One of my friends, well, I grew up with both of them, but one of him and I used to play the EA Sports back in the day all the time. He
Oh
was a
yeah.
very, very, very casual NASCAR fan at that time. I was a big NASCAR fan, and he just went to his first NASCAR race with me and my other buddy 2 years ago to Iowa, and
Mm-hmm.
I had to explain so many things to them there at the track, and d remind you that these guys are casual fans, so they understand, you know, stages for the most part.
They have a
Y-
basic
yeah,
understanding of the
understanding.
sort of general flow.
But like when I got there, and you can see the whole racetrack from Iowa, so it's a if you haven't been to Iowa, it's definitely worth your money and time to go
I
there.
have not. At some point, I might make it out there.
It's a fun little track. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, so that kind of sucks, but who cares?
Uh,
There's
I'm used
camping.
to that.
There's camping. I would love to go camp there, but that's irrelevant. So, um, I had
Let's
to,
hear you're talking to your friend at the
yeah,
track.
I had to explain to them, and mind you, it's not the easiest thing to, yell at your friend
Yeah, mid race, I can hear,
mid-race,
hey,
but
he
they're
just
like,
crashed for fifth.
what's going on? What lap are they on? You got to point at the pylon. You're explaining the pylon. You're kind of explaining everything, what's going on, like, and just everything that's going on there. It's so like your senses are taking everything. You smell, you hear, everything's going on. It just,
Sensory overload.
yes,
It
it
is a
just,
lot, especially as a
yeah,
first time viewer. It is
yes.
a
It's,
lot. It was so loud. That first race I
yeah,
went with my grandma. I spent the first 20 laps under the grandstands because I was not prepared for quite how loud 900 horsepower was.
yeah,
It helped
yeah,
that there were at least one red. I think there were two red flags that day, so I got my little ears
yeah,
got some breaks. But
yeah. But that's what,
it's a lot.
yes, but that's what they have going for them is I've been to many football games. I've been to Lambeau Field like 4 or 5 times. I think Lambeau is probably one of the coolest stadiums for nostalgic, old, just a real like even if you're not a Packers fan, there was like guys from Ireland that came over and they're like, hey, we're just here because we heard there's a really cool stadium.
It's
Like,
football's
yeah,
Wrigley Field or
yeah,
Fenway
like
Park.
you
I'm
you
going actually to Lambeau next month. I'm
ooh,
very
yeah,
looking forward to it.
it's fun and like don't get me wrong, football games and going to Lambeau is an experience. It's great, but it doesn't touch a candle to going to a NASCAR race. There's just
Yeah,
something
it's
about
different.
like the whole experience. You can get close to drivers. You can like the smell, the sounds, the food, the partying's different than tailgating in a football area. Like they're still both fun. I'm not taking anything away from football, but like long story short, after I brought them to that race, they had such more of an appreciation to NASCAR and racing. So now when we turn it on, they have more of an idea like, holy shit, those cars are going around there so much faster. Like when you're
Yeah,
watching on
faster than it
TV,
looks. Yeah.
it's nothing. You're like, I probably could
TV
drive
does
that.
not do it justice,
Yeah.
especially today. It feels like a
No.
lot of the Fox, especially, but it feels like the cameras have gotten a
Yeah.
lot worse at capturing the sense of speed.
Agreed. So like that should be NASCAR's bread and butter, what they should be focusing on.
Oh
Obviously,
yeah.
they have a bunch of other stuff that they need to clean up. But I don't know why that's not fixed. I don't know why they don't have better Wi-Fi there. People, Denny's talked about this. There's been many other drivers and fans that have talked about why isn't the internet better at some of these places? Like
Yeah.
because people want to share that stuff. When I go to Lambo, I can Snapchat. I can literally send out all my stuff. I can make phone calls. It's
I
sometimes
am absolutely
it's a
not
little
used
wonky,
to.
but
Yeah.
it's way better than when I go to a racetrack because like I don't understand like that should be your number one thing, especially if you're trying to get the young demographic. That's all they want to do
Spend the
is
money and get good
yeah,
Wi-Fi into the places.
yes,
I know you can do it. It's
yeah,
possible.
yeah. So I don't know. Long story short, that like if you haven't been to a race, definitely go to a race. It
Oh yeah.
it'll blow your
I
mind, change
still
your mind.
love the race weekend.
Yeah,
I may hate the car, but
agreed.
there's
But
nothing quite like the pace
yeah,
laps
the
getting ready for
fans,
the start.
the fans are so much different than a football fan. Like when I go to
Oh yeah.
Lambeau, there's some people there's some people in the stands and they're Packer fans and we'll like chit chat or we'll high five but it's just I it's hard to explain. It's so like even if they're wearing a different driver's shirt or jersey or whatever you want to call it, uh, like everyone kind of has a hatred towards Joey Logano, unless you're a Joey Logano fan. So you'll have the group of people just all cheering when he wrecks or does something stupid, and
Yeah.
like there's just I don't know, there's something about it that even though I might dislike NASCAR at this time and not enjoy watching it and not watch it, I will 10 times over, like you said, go to the racetrack and watch a race because the enjoyment factor is just so much better because there's just so much more to do and see, and I'm not just stuck on my television watching a garbage race. So,
There's so much there's a lot of enjoyment. It takes a lot more to not enjoy a race in person.
mhm,
And there's a lot to the race weekend that is still just incredible to experience, even with all the various problems. It's why I still go to races. I still try and bring my friends. And like you mentioned, yeah, sometimes they have a lot of questions, and I tend to have a much harder time getting them to
yeah,
tune into the races with more regularity.
yeah,
But they all have a good time.
yeah,
And I do think, yeah, things like the at track experience when it comes to amenities like having Wi-Fi that isn't complete shit
mhm,
is something that can go a long way in making a casual have a much better time. I don't think I've ever been to a NASCAR race where I've been able to reliably use my phone, which
agreed.
then becomes a double-edged sword at some places where they started taking out pylons.
I know.
Or because I know Bristol, they've got the big TV hanging in the
Mhm,
center of the track. When it was first put up there, they had a scoring ticker ring around the bottom of that screen. By the time I went to Bristol last spring, they didn't have that. And sure, the side of the Jumbotron has the running order, but I'd
mhm.
much prefer it if the whole Jumbotron was the
The-
pictures or the
yeah,
replays that they're showing. And then you had that separate big ticker. That was my biggest gripe
yeah,
with Rockingham, which granted was essentially dormant for at least the past 10 years after that
Yeah,
almost sort of failed revival in like 2011.
correct.
The scoreboard didn't work, and I I kind of got some reception to check the NASCAR app on my phone, but that was 2 laps behind, so
I
that
know.
wasn't particularly helpful. I go to a lot of dirt races, and you really just need a scoreboard that functions goes a
Yeah,
long
it
way
does.
in
That and
having a fan be able to pay attention to what's happening.
yeah, just give me the ranks of where everyone's at and the lap count. That's
Yep,
literally
positions,
all you need.
position, and lap count. There you
Yeah,
go. And
yeah.
that's another thing where it's like ideally you want as least complication as possible.
Hmm.
That's why I'm anti-stage yellows. It's just that's the
Yep.
laps. Here's how many they are. All those numbers. Just keep an eye on those, and find your guy. And there you go. And then you can just enjoy the race because the casual really, by definition, the casual doesn't care as much. So by trying it's kind of fool's gold to try and turn the championship into something that appeals more to the casuals than to the diehards, because
Hmm.
it never will appeal more to the casuals than the diehards.
Yeah.
And at best, as we've seen, you're just going to end up annoying more diehards than you turn casuals into diehards. And
Correct.
but I'm very glad the at track experience is still great. I try to go to 2 to 3 cup races a year. I've been able to do that the past couple of years, thankfully. And I want to have some optimism that in the near future it's going to get even better. And I think that part of the reason I still watch NASCAR, part of the reason I care to make a Twitter account and bitch at everything, is because I genuinely believe that while some of the NASCAR of mid 2000s, like the height of cultural relevancy, some of that was not sustainable, no matter what,
Hmm.
and was certainly a bubble, especially after Dale Earnhardt died. That really did contribute to the bubble of popularity because it's just something. It's something that doesn't really apply to other sports. You don't have the quarterback die in overtime.
No. Yeah.
That's just not something that had to put it like in a
Yeah.
blunt way. And that sort of macabre interest um did something in growing the sport. But without you definitely do not need that. I'm not advocating. Please do not take this the wrong way. But I do believe that NASCAR, even today in 2025, as much as some might say, oh, the media landscape has changed, the fans are the same, you can never go back to the way it was, it'll never work like that again. I think it will. I've met on my travels and in my everyday life in a big city, I have met a far more former NASCAR fans than current.
Hmm.
And the vast majority of them would very willingly get back into the sport if a few big changes were made. And I think that there is reason to keep fighting for NASCAR to be the best that it can be.
Yeah.
And I think that if set on the right path, in 10 years, NASCAR could be really, really big again. 2006 big, maybe not. 2011 big, oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I would say to end on a note, if like you were saying, these few big changes, and I do agree. I think it's the point standings. If they would just put
Mm-hmm.
that back to a full season, it doesn't matter if it's the Latford system, a different system, as long as it's a full season point standings, um, and they either fix or eradicate this Gen 7 to make the racing better, I think you get a bunch of fans back in the sport, and it's not going to be like a light switch like some of these people on Twitter and X are being like, "Oh, you think
it's
just
it's not
switching
an
it?"
instant fix, so it's
It's
not worth trying.
yeah, it's like no, it's not going to be like a light switch because you already eradicated all those fans and people. They're not on the edge of their
Mm,
seat like just waiting for NASCAR to do it. They're going to have to hear it through the grapevine. They're going to have to like see it and it's going to be a long process. It's going to be at least a 3 to 5 year growth process.
minimum.
Yeah, but that's going to be a way better growth than they've had in the last 10 years.
You
It's
want to
been
at
like
least put
this
the trend on the
downwards.
right way.
Yeah. So
If it took, put it this way, if it took 20 years to get here, 20 years to go from those heights to
yeah,
these lows, it's hopefully it won't take that long, but it'd
no,
be pretty naive to assume it would be instant
yeah,
to receive. And I bet it's a bit of a straw man to try and insinuate people advocating for these sorts of changes are why are you pretending like this is a quick fix? I'm not I don't want to be I don't want it to come off like I think that
yeah,
we'll instantly
yeah,
see immediate growth, although I do think we'll very quickly at least see the trend reverse.
yeah.
And from there, I mean, the Xfinity series right now is amazing.
Mhm.
Imagine how much better it'd be to follow along with it if the Xfinity series and the trucks had full season
Yeah,
points. I'd be even more engaged.
yeah. Well, the other thing too, I don't know if you saw a thing. Jeb Burton was talking about if they didn't have stages and they just, they still had the playoffs, but they just took away the stages, he would be higher in points because the way that the Xfinity works, they're obviously there's way less talent in the Xfinity series than there is in the Cup series. So the same continuous, people get the uh, stage points. So
Yeah.
that's an extra, you know, what 20 plus or 20 points at most that you can gain every single week. And
It's a lot of points
yeah,
racing that's not racing for the win.
yeah.
and
So
and
they
well,
don't
because
do
also
that.
some of
They
that
don't they don't points race.
no, they don't points race. And also some of that comes down to qualifying too, with the shorter race weekends.
Yeah.
This is something that I remember Clint Boyer complaining about in during the COVID years. I don't remember if it was 2020 or 2021, but back when most races just didn't have qualifying,
Mhm.
period.
Yeah.
He was saying that it really hurts the mid-pack teams because the rich get richer.
Yeah.
If your starting order is determined by a metric that's mostly your last race's result, it's
Yep.
really hard to dig out of that hole if you're
Right.
starting 15th to 20th every week, especially in a car that couldn't pass that well.
Hmm.
And today we see that with the qualifying order. Xfinity and trucks, if I recall correctly, are staggered in that when you win the pole, that means you get first pit selection for the following week.
Yeah.
But the draw for when you go out to qualify, again, someone please correct me if I'm wrong. You correct me if I'm wrong or in the comments or whatever. I believe they're still using a metric format to determine qualifying order. And regardless of the whole group A and B nonsense,
Mhm.
it still means that you're getting within those groups, the higher in points drivers are getting, generally speaking, more advantageous qualifying draws. And it just the randomness of the way they used to do with the random draw helped sort of
Yeah.
give at least a little bit of a balance towards you're not always going to get the same guys starting up front every single week. And I think things like that and things like removing stage points could go a long way in helping to elevate good runs from small teams, and especially in the Xfinity series, and especially for people like Jeb Burton.
Yeah. Um, I don't want to run this any longer, and I would like to save this
That's all right. I
for
do have
yeah.
to run. It was fantastic talking to you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no, thank you. We'll get you back on. We'll do some more chit chatting because we got this was a longer one, but there's way more we could talk about.
Oh yeah, and
Um,
I'll be back.
so thanks a ton, Alex, for being on. We'll catch you later. And you got anything else to say to the people before we dip out of here?
I hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble. I swear I am not always, I don't hate everything in life. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell so you can get notified when the next episode drops.
That's right. All right. See you guys later.
Adios. Thank you again for having me.